Hey, what's up, guys? It's Tibbs. And in case you guys missed it, a couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to sit down with Skarm Tank and discuss the viability of Feral Druid Tank in Classic WoW. And I've got to say, guys, I've done a handful of these deep dives thus far. A lot of them have been very interesting, a lot of them have been very informative. But this one in particular was very special because I feel like druids, in particular as a class, have been very underrated over the years and in many times ridiculed. So it was very interesting to get Skarm's perspective on the druid tanking class and to hear just how far he's been able to tank as a feral druid. Spoiler alert, the guy has tanked Nax and AQ40 as a feral druid, albeit excluding a couple of bosses. So very, very exciting, very, very interesting. Skarm played back in original vanilla and got into Nax in original vanilla, as well as in private server vanilla. So he has very much a double-sided perspective on these things. And yeah, enough of the intro. Check this guy out, guys. This deep dive's a little bit less constructed, I guess, in the previous ones. We had some issues with the scene transitions earlier, but it plays, I think, pretty well as a podcast. So enjoy Skarm, guys. Definitely follow him in the links in the description below. I will see you guys on Twitch, where I'm streaming the Classic WoW beta. And as always, tips out, baby. Take care.
Yeah, I do think we're going to see, because even on private servers, I see a decent number of ferals. Like druids in general are the least played class. But even considering that, yeah, I think we're going to see kind of a renaissance, I guess you could say, for feral druids in Classic.
They are the least played class. Out of curiosity in the chat, who here plays a druid? Resto, Feral, doesn't matter. Who here plays a druid or is planning to play a druid in Classic? And it's a random question, but why do you think it's so little?
I think, well, like I said earlier, for literally the first half of vanilla in retail, druids were just god awful at everything, really. And so I think, I really do think that just stuck and I think it still persists today to some degree. Some people, and they aren't, and I will say even now, some people they like numbers. They like see themselves top the meters, right? Druids they're not meter toppers. They're kind of like jack of all trades. They can, I have a video on my YouTube of I'm doing an AQ41 on my an AQ40 run on my druid, and I'm tanking between pulls. I'm tanking one pull and healing the next. I'm tanking this boss, I'm healing this boss with the same spec, switching gear around. So doing that, I'm not going to top healing meters because I'm not healing the whole time. I'm not going to top damage meters as a tank. Some people really like topping meters, and druid, I will say, if you're obsessed with topping meters, druid's not the best class for you because you won't see a lot of high numbers as a druid, but you get your fulfillment, your usefulness by fulfilling, being like a Swiss Army knife, really, fulfilling what role you need at the appropriate time. And they are when druids specialize in things, they can become feral cat DPS if you really go all out and farm your consumes, farm your crowd pummelers. Druids cats can do very respectable single target DPS. On our first Kelter's Odd kill on my warrior, which was 4 weeks into Nax releasing on Lightbringer, so no world buffs yet or anything. My first KT kill, a feral druid is #1 DPS on that fight.
That's actually pretty crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah,
I just wanted to say then let's talk about what druids, especially druid tanks, can do, and let's talk about what they can't do. So, I have here in front of me a document that you sent me, or we filled out. You filled it out more than I did, definitely, about some of the talking points we want to discuss today. And one of the things you have here is, in 90 to 95% of situations, yes, they are viable compared to warriors. What is it that druids have that warriors don't have? And what is it that druids lack that warriors have that make you say that?
So druids, I'll start off by saying that throughout any raid tier of gear, druid threat is amazing. The reason why it's amazing is because of course, manual crowd pummeler. For those who may not know, it's a weapon from Gnomergon. It's a two-handed mace. It has the DPS is irrelevant because in bear and cat form, the weapon DPS, whatever weapon you have, is irrelevant. It goes off something different. Basically, your pause or your weapon. It's its own weapon. But so manual crowd pummeler, it has some strength and agi on it. But when you use it as a use effect, that increases your attack speed by 50% for 30 seconds, and you can use it back to back to back. The catch is that each pummeler only has 3 charges, so you have to if you use all 3 charges during a fight, that's it. You basically delete it, you throw it away, and you have to farm multiple of them, which isn't like, I'll talk about that later if you want, or I'll make another video about it in the future. It's not as bad as people might think farming those. It's really not too much of a chore, but that's a level 29 weapon. So at any point, like as soon as you ding 60, having that weapon by itself, the rest of your gear, I'm not going to say it's irrelevant, but like most of your threat comes from having that weapon. So if you have that weapon, druids always generate most of the time more threat than warriors, and like a lot more too, not just a little bit. And so druids are like, when warriors start catching up and surpass druids a little bit once they have like my warrior, for example. I have Thunder Fury, I have Thunder, Hunger and Cold. I have all the best gear that you can get as a tank for threat. And my warrior and my druid's threat are about the same.
Wow.
They differ a little bit, right? And the only reason that my druid's threat's that high is because of manual crowd pummeler. I have other gear as well, of course, but if my druid had full blues and manual crowd pummeler, as opposed to all the other gear I have, the threat wouldn't be that much lower. So like even in pre-raid Biss, druid could walk right into Molten Core with full blues and a crowd pummeler, and just no one's going to catch that druid on threat. Nobody. Not that gear level. Not even close.
What about AoE? What about AoE and cleave threat?
So druids have they have a move called Swipe, which hits 3 targets, and it actually generates decent AoE threat, and you can more or less spam it. Against 3 targets or less, druids, I'd say, are as good or better than warriors for AoE threat. When it gets to, and even 4, you can like tab around a little bit and keep up. Once it gets to like 5 or more targets, druids start to fall behind any AoE threat. And one of the druid's weaknesses, which we can go over as well, we'll go over the strengths and weaknesses, of course, but one of the druid weaknesses for tanking several mobs is when you're tanking a lot of mobs, instead of tanking a boss where one thing's hitting you for a lot, you're tanking a lot of different things that are all hitting you for a little bit. What really helps mitigate that damage when you're tanking, like, say, 10 mobs or more, is having a shield and be able to block their attacks. Because a lot of the time, if your block values, like if you're sitting in like BWL level gear as a warrior, and if you block an attack from a normal mob, you're not going to take any damage. You're going to take very little damage just because the block value will override that. Druids can't do that. They don't have a shield. The only druids have dodge, and that's it. And so they're just face tanking everything. They're taking all that damage. So druids, when they're tanking a lot of different mobs, they actually take a significant higher amount of damage than a warrior or even a paladin, because paladins have shields too.
Yeah.
So that's the main issue with and they can't use like engineering items. That's another weakness. They can't use engineering items in a bear form. So druids, I wouldn't. They are weak AoE tanks. They're the worst out of the 3 classes for sure. But I'd say that's probably their biggest weakness, to be honest, is AoE tanking.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, what about their gearing? Now, one of the things that I've heard that makes Feral Druids pretty great, especially in Molten Core, is that they don't need that much gear relative to warriors to be able to perform. We'll go over gearing specifically, but kind of generally speaking, how is it?
So without getting into like just too many details, technicalities rather, druids don't, just the way that like bear form works, it kind of, just being in bear form kind of negates, how do I put this? Just warriors are a lot more gear reliant than druids, let's put it that way. Warriors rely a lot more on gear than a bear does. So a warrior in blues versus a druid in blues, like the druid's gonna take less damage and generate more threat, period. Like in Molten Core, if I'm rolling in classic, I'm gonna have a druid and a warrior eventually, but I'm starting off with my druid just because druids at, like, I'm talking like week 1, week 2 Molten Core, druids are better tanks, I think, than warriors.
That's
so
crazy.
yeah. So druids just they aren't as gear reliant as warriors, I guess, is the easy way to put it. So having because all their gear is just stats basically. So and they have like percentage modifiers for armor and health. So like a druid in comparing a warrior to a druid in full like previous full blues, the warrior has about 4,800 health, druid has about 5,500. The warrior has about 7,000 armor, and the druid has almost 12,000. So that's a big difference.
Ooh. And they're so much faster to level too, for the most part.
Oh, yeah, druids are way easier to level than warriors, hands down. Like, I don't think anyone would dispute that. Warriors are awful leveling, and druids are really good at it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's cool. That's great that you're rolling Druid off the bat. We've had this conversation before, but I love hearing your reasoning behind it.
Hmm.
Some of the other weaknesses that druids have too, because we don't want to just paint the optimistic picture. Let's talk about the full story.
Of
Some
course.
some of the other weaknesses here, breaking fear, um, no
Yes.
defensive cooldowns. Can you talk to me about those a little bit?
So warriors have several ways to break fear. They can either switch to Zerker stance and pop Berserker Rage and be immune to fear for 10 seconds. They have Death Wish, which is 30-second immunity. Reckless is even, or even if you're an undead warrior in Horde, you have a fourth way to break fear. So
Yeah.
warriors have no problem doing that. Druids have nothing. The only thing that they have is their PvP trinket, which you can use for PvE encounters that have fear, absolutely. But it's only once. It's a 5-minute cooldown, so it's only gonna be once per fight. So on fights that and there's not many, like Onyxia Fears, Magmadar, trying to think, Neff. There's like 6 bosses in the game total that fear. That's it. So druids can't break fear, warriors can. Simple
Yeah.
as that.
And you can use PvP trinket in bear form, right?
Correct. Yes, you can.
Awesome. But there's some things
I
you can't use in bear form. There's some consumables you can't use in bear form.
Yeah, you can't use any potions in bear form at all. You can't use any like elixirs or like consumes that you pop before pull. Excuse me. Consumables that you pop before pull you can't use in bear form, which might seem trivial because you're out of combat, but when you shift out bear form, you lose all your rage. So if you're sitting on like 100 rage before a boss, which is a good tactic to do, like as a warrior or druid. So when you pull the boss, you have 100 or you have a lot of rage to open up right away. If you shift out at all to pop anything as a druid, you're going to lose all that rage. When you shift back, but on the flip side though, druids don't need as much rage as warriors. So that kind of counterbalances that part counteracts itself kind of. But druids can't use potions in the middle of combat. Like you can pop a stone shield potion for 2,000 armor before pull, but to do it while you're tanking a boss, it's possible. Like you can technically, with good ping, like if you don't have any lag, like bosses hit once every 2 seconds, right? You can shift that. Right as you get hit, you can shift out, pop a potion, and shift back because none of that affects the global cooldown, and do that before the boss hits you again. But it's a tight window, it's risky.
Yeah, yeah.
And druids can't use like goblin sapper charges, dynamite, and those like the engineering stuff. We can't use in bear form either. So that sucks. It's annoying. You also can't like check your mailbox, talk to NPCs. In Scholomance, whenever I do Skolo on my druid, there's a lot of gates that you have to open, and druids can't open gates because we don't have thumbs, I guess.
Yeah.
And like I'm saving rage for the next pull, and like I have to ask someone to open the door for me. I feel like an asshole asking someone, "Can you open this gate, dude?" Because I'm barefoot and I don't want to shift out. So, but honestly, like that's annoying. Like Hellstones either druids can't use them in bear form, but it's negligible. Honestly, it sounds worse than it is.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny, like full immersion. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Blizzard went full immersion with that.
Oh yeah,
But even if they can't use consumables, they can actually get pretty far in the game. And you mentioned at
yeah,
the start how you've tanked almost all the bosses in Nax as a druid. Can you kind of give me a breakdown before we get into the nitty gritty and start, discussing talents and just going really deep into it? Can you give me kind of the general, every single raid breakdown? How well does a druid perform in Molten Core? How well does it do in BWL? How well, so on and so forth. How do Feral Druid tanks, main tanks specifically, how do they fare in each raid?
sure. So and I like that you said main tanks. As far as off tanking goes, druids can off tank anything that off tanking is a different job. So druids can off tank anything just fine at any point. I'll just say that right now. As far as main tanking goes, druids can main tank anything in Molten Core from the start. Magmadar is the only possible issue, and I'll say that because he does fear, which he only fears once every 30 seconds, so that's easy enough to get around. But bosses that hit, and there's not many of these in vanilla, there's only like 4 or 5 bosses that hit quickly and then enrage. Like so Magmadar, he has 2 heads, each head bites you, so he attacks. His attack speed's like a little faster. He's basically dual wielding, and he enrages sometimes. You can trank shot it, but during that like few seconds when he might be enraged, if the hunter's slow or whatever, he's gonna hit a druid really hard, mainly because druids can get crit and crush, which I'll go into, and which usually isn't a problem, but they can get crit and crushed, and they don't have as much avoidance as a warrior. So when you're getting hit fast, either by multiple mobs or by one mob that's basically dual wielding, druids do take more damage than warriors typically, especially if it's a boss that can crit and crush you. So like for Magmadar, you can still counteract it by being, and honestly, even in blues, like if you're just going in Molten Core for the first time, I would even say like a druid would probably still take less damage just because a druid can be armor capped in blues. You can get with Stone Shield Potion for 2,000 armor. Your regular armor consumes, and like the inspiration buff from a priest or a shaman, the 25% armor for 15 seconds whenever they crit you the heal. You'll be at armor cap, which is around, it's like between 17 and 18,000, but you can hit that as a druid in blues.
How much mitigation does 17 to 18,000 give you?
75%.
Ooh.
So yeah, even like if you have that much armor in Molten Core, like you shouldn't be dying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't care if you're a druid or it doesn't matter. So druids can tank Molten Core just fine. BWL is where there's not a lot of upgrades. There's only like 4 upgrades honestly in Molten Core for a druid. So whereas a warrior can get like full tier 1, a shield, everything else. So going into BWL, druids, their gear kind of falls behind a little bit, but at the same time, for specifically, well, I'll say the first 3 bosses. Razor Gore, you need like 2 or 4 tanks for all the trash that comes out. Druids are really good at tanking trash, mainly because they can pull from a distance easily, or instantly rather, with Moonfire or Fairy Fire. So if you see a mob like across the room, you can just hit it once and it'll come to you. And they have Feral Charge, which is 15-second cooldown. It roots the whatever you charge for 4 seconds, and it's a charge. You don't have to shift out of bear form. It costs 5 rage only. Feral Charge is an amazing tool. You can even go into cat form and like sprint across the room if you have to. So druids have excellent mobility even indoors, and so for a fight like Razor Gore, they're just really good at tanking the trash. For Veil, and like because of the lack of gear in BWL in general, at first you're gonna want to wear you're gonna want Flask. You know what I mean? Like go full out with consumes. That will make, if you Flask and pop full consumes and everything else, that will counterbalance the lack of gear that you have at the time. And
Absolutely.
for Veil Straz and Broodlord, those are the first 2 like threat fights where Veil, you just want to kill them fast. Warriors, even a warrior in full greens on Veil Straz is gonna push the threat ceiling. Like for I also get comments a lot here, comments saying like, oh, just tell your DPS to hold back, threat shouldn't be an issue, blah blah blah. Like people are basically saying like, oh, mitigation's more important than threat all the time. And Veil Straz is the first example where that's the opposite, because you want to kill them fast. There's a lot of raid damage, tanks are blowing up, everything else. And warriors on that fight, because of how execute works, Veil Straz, for people who might not be familiar with the fight real quick, Veil starts at 30% health. And he has 1 million health, but it starts at 30%. The reason why that's important is because when you get to 20% health, warriors can start executing. And that's where a lot of warrior damage comes from. Execute is independent of your weapons. It's a static, it has nothing to do with what weapon you have. It does damage based on how much rage you have, and has its own formula. If you're and you have infinite rage on that fight because of how the fight works. So any warrior, I don't care what gear you have, any warrior spamming execute nonstop is gonna do a ton of damage and generate a ton of threat. The tanks are gonna have to hold threat off that warrior. Well, because of how well druids can generate threat with manual crowd polymer, druids are really, really, at that point in the game, I would say they're better than warriors for main tanking Veil, just because of the threat they can generate. A warrior going into BWL for the first time is not going to be able to generate threat that's anywhere close to a druid, unless like the exception is if you have like rank 14 gear. Really, that's the only exception. If a warrior has rank 14 weapons and armor and specs fury prot, then yeah, they can generate druid threat, but besides, that's the only exception really.
So all the way through BWL, druids have the threat advantage over warriors.
Correct. And however, so the first, like I said, Veil and Broodlord are threat base fights. The 3 Drakes, the Fire Maw, Ebonrock, and Flame Gore, the next 3 bosses, they're tauntable, and due to how the fights work, they're not threat fights at all. So your druid can tank those fights, but like prot warriors can also tank them just fine. And then Chromagus and Neff, Hey guys. Due to how like hard Chromagus hits, and also the fact that he does a random stun during the fight, that he does a random debuff called Brutal Affliction Bronze that will randomly stun you for 5 seconds as long as you have the debuff. To get rid of that debuff, you have to use Hourglass Sand. Well, guess what? Druids can't use. However you use sand, I don't know what you do exactly to like. You pour the sand over you, whatever. Druids can't do whatever that they have to do to use the. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, druids can't use sand in bear form, and if you get stunned while tanking Chromagus, that's bad news.
It gets caught in their fur, you know. It's annoying, you know.
I guess. Well, like, shouldn't it cleanse you anyway? I don't know, but yeah, druids. I've off tanked Chromagus, like time lapse tanked. I've off tanked Chromagus during progression. Still hits extremely hard. Like I would still rather have a warrior during that. But druids. Speaking of off tanking like that, in any fight where you have to keep secondary threat, but the boss is immune to taunt, like for example, Chromagus or Hakar, where they have a mechanic that makes the main tank lose threat, and then they turn to whoever has the second highest threat in the list. Druids are much better than warriors at generating secondary threat on a mob, just because of how the class mechanics will go into that. But druids are amazing at generating secondary threat compared to warriors. So when you can't just taunt the boss, away from the main tank, druids are really good at that. And Nefarian, he fears and he turns druids into cat form, which is you don't really want. I have a video of me tanking Nef. It's I'm overgeared for the encounter. I wouldn't recommend a druid tank Nef though, especially not during progression.
Okay, absolutely. That's because the class call, right? Yeah, it turns its cat. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So moving on to ZG and AQ20, those are some of the easier raids. I'm just going to go ahead and assume that pretty much everything is fine there. Is there anything that should be called out?
Not really anything major. Like the bat boss in ZG fears, but you can dispel it. I just recently made a druid video on ZG. It's called Man vs. Bear 3. If anyone wants to check it out later, kind of goes over things. But ZG and AQ20, there's some little minor nuances, but for the most part, you're not going to have trouble tanking either of those raids, even zoning in for the first time, if you have the appropriate gear.
What about a fresh 60? Because usually you run those raids pretty early on. If it's a later patch, that is. Fresh 60, you're in greens and blues. Can you tank AQ20 and ZG?
I wouldn't recommend anybody tanking either of those places in greens, even if it's a warrior. So try to get at least full pre-Biss before you tank a raid. I would, because just tanks in general, your role is more important than your individual role is more important than like a single DPS or a single healer. Because if you die or if you lose threat, that's probably a wipe. Whereas if a DPS is in greens and not doing quite as much damage, or if a healer's in greens and going a little bit faster, that's nothing compared to a tank in greens that dies or loses threat. So just for that reason alone, like tanking in general, and that's kind of the message I'm trying to put out continuously in my videos, that tanking in general should be taken a little more seriously because so much lies on you, especially as the main tank. Like off tanks can get it if you're Wandu ZG or AQ20 and you haven't managed to get like full pre-Biss yet and you have a few greens still, you can still off tank pretty well. I would get some consumables if I were you, but you can still off tank just fine. But as far as main tanking goes, like you really want to, the main tank should be like the most prepared person in a raid, should have the most consumables, should have some of the best gear than anybody else in the raid. Doesn't matter what class you are.
Absolutely. Not biased, by the way. But no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, honestly, that's not biased. I think that
you're
if
anyone
wants to debate me on that, that's fine. But that's my position on that.
No, absolutely. And no, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, your raid is only as strong as your tank's threat ability and his ability to stay alive. So
absolutely.
And obviously, the requirements to staying alive become exponentially higher in AQ40. If you guys watched my video recently, you guys know that AQ40 is really the raid, or at least the second half of AQ40 is really the raid where, a lot of casual players probably won't be able to participate just because, the time commitment is so high and the mechanics do get a little bit more intense.
Yes.
So in that kind of environment, a more difficult environment, essentially what's the hard mode version of Classic, how do Feral Druid tanks fare and what should they know specifically for that raid?
So for AQ40, and this really applies to anybody who's zoning into AQ40, you want to have some gear from MC and BWL. You know what I mean? Like, don't walk in AQ40 in greens and blues. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
You're not gonna have a good time, and that applies for tanks, DPS, or healers. So, assuming you have the appropriate gear, which there is some more feral gear that drops out BWL. There's quite a few pieces actually. Like you can get a neck from Neff, shoulders, cloak, chest. So yeah, actually a lot of your gear starts filling out in BWL. Boots, there's a belt even. The rest of that gear that you haven't gotten in BWL drops in AQ40. AQ40 is the mecca for Feral Druids. So much gear drops in AQ40, and a lot of it's like there's a leather helm, for example, called Guise of the Devourer. Do you want to pull it up? I don't have a screenshot.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's Google it real quick. It's when you see this helm, like no one but a Feral Druid would want this at all. It's like a rogues wouldn't want it. Nobody else would want this but a tank, a Feral tank. So a lot of the gear that you get is just uncontested. If you're the only Feral tank in the raid, bam, that doesn't, I don't care what your loot system is, that helm's going to you. So a lot of the Feral gear starts dropping in EQ40, which is really nice. And the first half of AQ40 is really not too difficult, especially while tanking. There's nothing really too stressful. Like Skarm, the first boss, he doesn't hit very hard. He's vulnerable to taunt. Like druids can tank that boss just fine. Sartura doesn't really have a tank, to be honest, 'cause she's all over the place. Bug family, druids can tank. I've my Feral Resto video actually starts off with Bug family. Shows me tanking the first boss that we kill, and once that boss dies, I shift out and help like dispel and heal people, which is really handy. Druids are great at doing that. Fankris is really easy. Vicidius, the next, or Viscidus, however you say it. There's two bosses in AQ40, Viscidus and Princess Huron, that, again, you can see those in my videos. You want to heal those regardless, just because of how the fights work. Like Viscidus, there's a lot of dispelling and healing throughout the raid. So you want to just put on resto gear, which as a druid, also because what's nice is because there's not a lot of druids in a raid typically. Even as a feral druid, tier 1 and tier 2 are, only druids can equip them, and they're healing based. Tier 1's not that great, but tier 2's a respectable set for resto. And so by the time you enter AQ40 even as a feral druid, you're probably going to have either full or most of your tier 2 from BWL if you've been running BWL consistently. So that's just, you'll have resto gear as well. That's a nice perk. And so there's Viscidus and Princess Huron in AQ40. You want to just heal those fights anyway, just because those fights are healing intensive and they're mitigation based as far as the tank goes. Huron, it's threat based as well, but just because of like cooldowns also. Huron's a good example of the warriors are good at that fight because they can pop cooldowns like Shield Wall, Last Stand, whereas druids can't. So, and as far as twin imps goes, a druid can tank twin imps if you've been lucky with drops in AQ40 and you have all your gear from BWL, a druid can tank twin imps, which twin imps is a good example of a fight for a druid that, like I said earlier, druids can't pop potions in bear form. And there's a spell called Bark Skin also that's a 1 minute cooldown. It decreases your attack speed a little bit, but it also decreases the physical damage you take by 20% for 12 seconds, and it's a minute cooldown. So that's a nice spell for damage reduction. Twin imps, since they teleport across the room like they do, you're not going to be tanking 100% of the time. Like you'll be tanking the physical imp, and then he'll teleport, and then you'll shift out. So during that time, you can pop another Stone Shield potion. You can pop Bark Skin right before the teleport happens to mitigate a lot of the damage that you take. So druids, as long as you have the appropriate gear up to that point, druids can tank Twin Emperors. And same with Oro, same with Cthulhu. So druids actually fare pretty well in AQ40.
So that's pretty much, I mean, aside, like you said, aside from Viscidus and Huron, for the most part, you can tank every single boss in AQ40, including Cthulhu.
Yes.
Main tank.
Yes, and I even have a video of me being main tanking Viscidus and Huron even. But like if you watch the video, I talk about why I wouldn't recommend it. Kind of like, well, I just kind of said why I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, even main tank druids can do all that.
And we have a video, one of your videos in the background here. It's actually you tanking AQ40. You just finished Fankris. That's crazy. I mean, that flies right in the face of all conventional wisdom. For me, before I'd seen any of your videos, for me, kind of the conventional wisdom was you can bring a feral tank as an off tank. pick up one of the ads on Gar or something like that. It was kind of like this side role.
Yeah, and even then, it was people like laughed at it.
Exactly. So who sort of pioneered this, dude? Who pioneered this thinking? Was it you? Did you get this information from somebody else? Like what
So
convinced you to
I'll
try this in AQ and beyond?
so actually, yeah, I wanted to get to this. I'll go ahead and tell this story real quick.
Mhm.
So back in retail vanilla, I leveled a paladin first. That was my first 60. I eventually leveled a warrior and tanked all through up to 8 bosses in X in vanilla. That's my rating history in vanilla. We killed 8 bosses in X. I main tanked all content up till then. I had a druid bank alt that was my I had a druid bank alt that I eventually leveled to level 39 twink that eventually leveled just to 60 just for fun. I did one molten core on my druid. That was it. That's the only raid I ever did on my druid back then. And I think I was healing. But then I started doing like before BC came out, I started doing a lot of just 5 bans just for fun. And I was doing them on my druid, and I was doing them well. And this was patch 1.12. And I was also doing them during the TBC pre-patch, 2.0, when they got mangled and all that. But I was also doing it before then, and I'm like, this is actually like, I'm not dying. I'm holding threat. So I'm thinking like I got the basics down as a druid. Like why? And I also had throughout my rating history in vanilla. Also, there's this feral druid named Raelun that it's funny looking back, like I'm kind of embarrassed about this, but a lot of the shit that people were saying to me today, or just saying in general about how ferals can't tank and go heal something, I said those exact same things to him. And part of it maybe was just because I was insecure. I didn't want to like lose my tank spot, like I was a lot younger, I was more mature, all that. So, but I would give him shit all the time because we had him heal because he was like the only druid that we had for a while. So we had him heal most of the time. And this was during patch 1.9. So this was after the revamp. But yeah, he was actually really smart for the time. I don't know where he got his information from, but he's honestly, I would say, the first person I learned about feral tanking from. And looking back, a lot of the things he said were accurate. Like he was telling me how much threat Maul generated. Because if you look at, here's another misconception, by the way. If you roll warrior and if you look at the heroic strike tooltip, it says something like, I'll pull it up right now because why not? 1 sec. So yeah, heroic strike, doesn't matter what rank. It says a strong attack that increases melee damage by 21 and causes a high amount of threat. So keyword causes a high amount of threat, right? And now let's go to Maul for druids. Spells. Where the hell is it? Maul says increases the druid's next attack by 27 damage. Same concept as heroic strike. It replaces your next wide attack with that move, right? Doesn't say anything about high threat for Maul, right? Which is actually ironic because Maul generates way higher threat than heroic strike. Like if warriors had Maul instead of heroic strike, there would threat. Like I've heard, I don't play retail. I've heard threat is not even a concept in retail anymore. Mm-hmm. That would be how it would be in vanilla if warriors had Maul. Maul is so good for generating threat. It's amazing, but it doesn't even say that in the tooltip. So how'd you know, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So and I remember him telling that, and I had like a level 10 druid at the time who had Maul already, and I remember him telling me that, and I'm thinking to myself, well, it doesn't even say it generates high threat, so how could it? That was my logic. That was my explanation. But so yeah, he knew what was going on before anyone else did. But I'm playing this druid and like right before TBC comes out, and I'm enjoying it a lot, and especially like when the pre-patch came out, like a lot of druid's problems in TBC were fixed, and like with the talent tree, and also they started releasing feral gear. And so when TBC came out, I was my guild's main tank at the time of my warrior, and my guild, we were talking about leveling together and doing Zan, and I started leveling my druid first, and I had my whole guild, like an enormous amount of peer pressure. My whole guild was telling me like, Skarm, what are you doing? Level your warrior, stop goofing around on your druid. Like people from all directions were telling me to stop leveling my druid and level my warrior instead. And I had a hunch. I was like, trust me on this, guys. I think that druids are going to be very capable in TBC of main tanking. And so, long story short, I main tanked all of TBC on my druid. Druids were absolutely great at it, and Burning Crusade proved everyone wrong. And by the time we started doing Karazhan, I'd convinced everyone at that point that like, oh wow, druids can tank.
So your history with druids isn't like, it's not like a private server renovation where you played a private
No,
server
absolutely not.
So this is going back to OG vanilla. You started to realize the viability of druid tanking.
Yeah, this is 2007 to this is actual retail. And yeah, so I had a hunch. I leveled it in TBC, and I was correct. And back in vanilla, they are better in TBC. They are better in TBC than vanilla. But so when fast forward to me rolling on private servers, which I've been playing on private servers for about 2 years now. Some people have been playing for a lot longer. Like you hear people going back as far as like 5-6 years. I've only been playing for 2 years or so on private servers. And my first tune on private server was my druid, because I'm like, I'd already done warrior in vanilla, and I remember rolling my druid in TBC, leveling and doing amazing. I'm like, you know what? I think druids. That was my hunch. Like I'm like, I think druids could have the tools in vanilla to tank. Like I thought that, so I rolled a druid, and I've been doing what I've been doing, since then.
That's awesome, man. Like that's a first. I've got to say, I did not expect you to say, you started playing it that far, that long of a time ago. But that's really cool. It definitely offers a unique perspective. And yeah, I mean, we can talk about Nax as well. I mean, I think for the most part, Nax is pretty straightforward. You can tank the A-bomb wing, but not Lotheb, not Makesna. Why not Makesna, out of curiosity?
Okay, so the thing about Makesna is that I think it's 45 seconds, every 50 seconds maybe, she does a web wrap, and she stuns the entire raid for 10 seconds, all 40 people, including the tank, and she's just beating on the tank for 10 seconds, and she also has a poison that reduces healing by 90%. So right before the web wrap happens, you have to put abolish poison on the tank. Horde can put a cleansing totem as well, but Alliance has to do a abolish poison, and you have to just put hots on the tank and hope the tank lives. That's fairly easy to do if you do it correctly throughout the fight. However, at 30%, Makesna enrages, and so if you don't kill her before the next web wrap, like a good strategy is to, like, if she's at like 32%, you stop DPS, wait for the web wrap, and then hopefully burn her down before she web wraps again. Not all guilds will have the DPS to even do that at first, though. So if she web wraps during the enrage, you have to shield wall. There's no way you can live through that. Druid, I don't care what gear you have, you're gonna die in like 3 seconds if you get web wrapped during the enrage as a druid.
Now, 4 Horsemen. What about 4 Horsemen?
So the front, there's 4 Horsemen. Obviously, you tank Thane and Mogren in the front, and then you tank Lady Blamu and Sir Zelik in the back. The back two, Lady and Sir Zelik, they don't hit nearly as hard as the front two. A druid can tank those just fine. But however, the front two 4 Horsemen, Mograine specifically, he has a ability called Righteous Fire, which I don't know if I pulled up, but it's a 25% chance of proccing on his attack. So it's like a chance on hit, basically, his auto attacks. And in addition to whatever auto attack damage he does, Righteous Fire hits initially for about 2,000, 2,500, and then puts a dot on you in addition to all that. That's 4,800 damage over 6 seconds. Fire damage, by the way. So Fire Resist gear is nice at first. I would recommend Fire Resist gear in general for the front, which that's not the problem with druids. They have plenty of Fire Resist gear to go off of. But the best way to survive Mograine is to just have him as much avoidance as you can, so that he doesn't, because the less he hits you, the less that will proc, right? So avoidance is really nice on Mograine just because of that. And also cooldowns, like almost always when I'm tanking Mograine, I either pop Last Stand or Shield Wall, or both.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why druids can tank the front once the raid's more geared. You have Horsemen on farm, druids can tank the front. But for progression, I would say they should tank the back. And and one more thing about 4 Horsemen real quick. You might have heard that you have to taunt during that fight, and if a taunt gets resisted, then that can be bad news. The warrior 4-piece tier 3 is 5% additional spell hit on taunt. which is taunt normally has a 16% chance to resist. So warriors get that. Druids don't. However, there's also a trinket out of ZG called Nat Pagel's Broken Reel that when you use it increases spell hit, which taunt is considered a spell. It increases spell hit by 10% for 20 seconds, which all tanks, I don't care what class you are, you want to have that trinket for Horsemen just to really make things easier. Like even with, there was one time on my warrior where I had 4-piece tier 3 already. So I'm like, I don't need the trinket, that's fine. Toward the end of the fight, I had 2 taunts in a row resist, and because of that, the raid wiped. So after that fight, I've never not worn the spell hit trinket for Horsemen. And as a druid, I've always worn that trinket and never had an issue with like taunts resisting. So druids can get around the taunt issue just fine with that trinket.
Awesome. So that's crazy, man. Like again, like just seeing their viability through all the raids is pretty insane. I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go along, but let's start breaking down things now. Now we kind of talked about on a general level. Let's start breaking things down more on a detailed level. Starting off with the races, aka I guess the factions in this case. So
yeah,
you have 2 druid races, gnomes and orcs. Oh yeah, of course.
Gnomes and orcs,
yeah.
Gnomes are the fuck.
Can you imagine, dude? Watch them bring it to retail. Anyways, you have Tauren and you have Night Elves, and essentially Alliance and Horde. What are the advantages and disadvantages of each in PvE as tanks, and which one would you recommend?
So I would really recommend that, like, being the decision between Alliance or Horde far outweighs racials. Does that make sense? So you really like don't roll a Tauren if you love War Stomp but hate Horde. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you don't like being on Horde, like roll Alliance. It doesn't matter what the racials are for druids. Well, anything really, but especially for druids. So, Night Elves get for tanking, they have a little bit more dodge than Taurens, and Blessing of Kings helps even out the health. But even with Blessing of Kings for the 10% stamina, Taurens will still typically have more health because of their racial, which is in vanilla, it's 5% of their total health. Not stamina, not from everything that a Tauren gets health from, it increases by 5% because of the racial. So Taurens will still have a little bit more health than Night Elves typically, even with Blessing of Kings taken into consideration. Night Elves have a little bit more dodge. The differences are for tanking, they're negligible. Notably, druids. So for tanking, it comes down to like Pally Blessings versus totems. Pally Blessings, Blessing of Might, and Blessing of Kings are really nice for threat and just health. You get a little bit of wins from Kings too. Horde have Strength of Earth and Grace of Air totem, which give a chunk of strength and a chunk of agility. Grace of Air gives more agi than Kings will. Druids do not benefit from Wind Fury totem. So, but however, as far as just normal threat goes, because druids can still get crowd pummel on Horde. The rotation is not any different from Alliance or Horde for tanking for druids, and the threat that they generate isn't really any different either. Despite the fact that druids don't benefit from Wind Fury, they still generate the same amount of threat that they do in Alliance, which is a lot. So and druids are and especially you could say because threat is just a bigger deal on Horde because of no blessing on Starvation, and the fact that not only do Fear Warriors not give salve, but they get Wind Fury, so that increases their damage and their threat even more. So as far as threat goes, it's a much bigger deal on Horde, and druids can still generate the same threat as they do in Alliance. So yeah, for that reason alone, like it's weird. Druids they have it a little better on Alliance just because of like Pally Blessings are a little better in general, and when DPSing, they have a lot more mana regen for like Judgment Wisdom. So just in general, druids are a little better on Alliance than they are on Horde. But as far as just threats concerned, Horde have much bigger threat issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the end of but at the end of the day, like I said, and for PvP, like Horde's probably a little better. War Stomp is a great skill for PvP. But really, at the end of the day, like, do you want to roll Alliance or Horde? That should be your deciding factor.
Do you want to roll Alliance or Horde, chat? What do you guys think? And Skarm, what will you be rolling in Classic?
I will be rolling Horde.
There you go, dude. A true man. A true
Right.
legend. Horde, that's right, that's right. Any homies? Okay. Anyways, uh no, great explanation. It goes beyond ratios for druids for sure. And with that being said, let's jump right into the talents. So normally when we do these deep dives, usually these are PvE deep dives. We talk about leveling talents and the end game. Um, I feel like for feral tanking specifically, we don't really need to talk about the leveling talents. I'd rather just talk about the build itself.
Sure.
Uh, so let's jump right into it. How would I spec a feral tank?
Sure. Well, so we're let's go to the feral tree first. I have it opened up. And this is most of this can be applied for actual leveling as well. Like when leveling, you just go down the feral tree until like level 40 or 50 or so, and then you start to branch out. But and you can tank druids, I will say, are probably better 5-man tanks than warriors while leveling, just because first of all, they're the appropriate spec, whereas you're not going to be a pro warrior.
Sure.
And they're just like I said, the way that druids scale with gear, um, they're they're not as reliant on gear as warriors. So there's better levelers in general. And another cool thing to note is that when you hit level 40 as a warrior, you upgrade from mail to plate, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to replace all that gear though. You don't just magically you don't get plate in the mail. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the gym doesn't mail you plate gear. You have to find it on your own. Whereas a bear, you get dire bear form immediately at level 40, and that's the net armor increase. So basically, as far as armor is concerned, all of your gear gets upgraded to plate immediately as a druid as soon as you get level 40, because you get that dire bear form instead of bear form.
That's a
So
really good point. I had never
mhm,
thought of that, but yeah, it's a great point.
exactly. But anyway, on to the talents. So let's start with the feral tree. We have the first two, which are ferocity and feral aggression. Let's go ahead and get 5 in ferocity. Reduces the cost of maul, swipe, claw, and rake by 5 rage or energy, which is 5 energy is not as big of a deal, but 5 rage is considering that maul only cost 15 rage and swipe cost 20. Now they cost 10 and 15. So it's a pretty huge decrease. The other talent, feral aggression, we're not going to get that for now. That's more of a cat talent. It does reduce, it makes demoralizing roar reduce more attack power, which is not bad. Demoralizing roar, another thing to note between warriors is for some reason, like warriors get demoralizing shout, druids get demoralizing roar. They're both the same kind of move. They AoE move that reduces attack power. For some reason, the warrior one reduces more attack power than the druid, even at max rank. It's only by like 20 or 30, but it's still more. So warriors should be the ones shouting and not druids. That makes sense as far as the debuff is concerned. So the main reason to get that feral aggression is for the ferocious bite increase, but that's again a DPS talent. That's a cat move. So for tanking, we're not going to take that. Moving down to the second tier, we have to the left we have feral instinct, which is our defiance that warriors have. Feral druids have a lot of talents that other classes have that warriors and rogues have, but they just have different names basically. So feral instinct it's the rogues master deception, the stealth talent, and the warrior's defiance all combined into one talent. So we're mainly getting it for the threat, but the increased stealth is it's nice too. Brutal impact increases the. We're not going to get that talent. It just increases the duration of bash and pounce by 1 second. It's not terribly useful. Thick hide, we're going to get 5 points in that for now. For strictly a feral, for strictly a tanking build, especially starting off when you don't have as good a gear, it's nice to have as much armor as you can get. So thick hide increases your armor by 10%, basically. Armor contribution from items, but that's what's multiplied by dire bear form. So more or less is a 10% net increase on armor. And since druids rely so much on armor, that's a nice talent to have. Moving on to the third tier, feeling swiftness is it's a PvP talent. You move faster in cat form while outdoors, and you dodge more in cat form. So that's strictly, even in PvE, cats don't really need to worry about that. It's more of a PvE thing, or PvP thing rather. Feral charge mandatory. I've talked about that earlier. It's just a great talent. 15-second cooldown, cost 5 rage only. You don't have warriors cannot charge in defensive stance, and they can't do their normal charge in combat even. So for a warrior to charge something in combat, you have to switch to berserker stance, which means losing some, if not all, of your rage, and then charging, which intercept costs. It's a 30-second cooldown and it costs 10 rage, versus feral charge, which is 15-second and 5 rage, and you don't have to leave bear form. So feral charge is just, and it feral charge interrupts cast too, which intercept, it's a stun, which if the mob's immune to, if the mob's vulnerable to stun, then obviously you're going to interrupt a cast. But otherwise, if a mob's immune to stun, you're not going to interrupt anything, right? Whereas even if a mob's immune to immobilize, the interrupt still applies. So if something's casting, like in one of my videos, I feral charge a boss, which the bosses are immune to immobilizing effects, but I still interrupted the cast.
Can you feral charge Kel'Thuzad Frostbolt?
Yes, but you can. However, you have to be feral charge as a dead zone. You have to be 8 yards or farther away, and you really don't want to be that far away. Just due to how the fight works, if you charge in the middle of melee, you might chain like a frost blast. So yeah, you can feral charge the frostbolt on KT, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay.
So Sharpen Claws, the next talent, we need it to get down to these two very good talents down here. So let's just, and it increases crit by 6% for 3 talent points, which that's another thing to know about Feral Druids, that the tree's kind of compact. Like most classes, you have to put in 5 points to get 5 crit, right? Like warriors and rogues. Whereas a druid, you can put in 3 points and get 6 crit. So nice little things like that. And speaking of that, moving down to the 4th talent, we'll look at Blood Frenzy right below Sharpen Claws, which we're not going to get this, but if you put 2 points in that, you'll see that that's Seal Fate for rogues, which is all the way down the assassination tree, and for 5 points. Druids get it in the middle of the feral tree for 2 points. So that's just another thing I like about ferals, that the talents are very accessible. They're all in one tree for the most part, and it doesn't cost a lot of points to get a lot of them. But anyway, take those 2 out, Blood Frenzy. To the right, we have Primal Fury, which we absolutely do want to get 2 points in that. This talent's the primary reason why I haven't brought it up yet, but druids, compared to warriors, where a warrior, even a Fury Prot warrior, can become rage starved sometimes, depending on the situation, mainly because they spend a lot more rage on their moves. Druids are almost never rage starved. This talent's a big reason why, because whenever you crit with an attack, that could be an auto attack or maul or swipe, anything that does damage in bear form. Whenever you crit, you get 5 rage back automatically. If you swipe costs 15 rage with a talent that we got. If you swipe 3 targets and all of them crit, you get 15 rage back. So it's basically a free swipe. And you only have maul and swipe. Those are your 2 moves that you're spamming. So druids, there's been many situations where I've just been hitting maul and swipe constantly, and I have 100 rage still, just because you can't spend it fast enough. So, and that also really comes in handy when that's the reason why feral druids are good at generating secondary threat, because warriors, when you're trying to generate secondary threat, you're not taking damage from the boss, right? The boss is not attacking you.
Right.
So all your rage is coming from your white auto attacks. That's it. Warriors, not only are their white attacks doing less damage, but they're spending a lot more rage on other moves. So they're getting rage is hard, while even as a fairy prot, it's a lot easier while dual wielding, but it's still not as easy as a feral druid to just have rage whenever you need it. And even if there's another talent we'll get later. Actually, let's move over to the rest of the tree real quick, since we're here. Let's get 5 points in Furor, which Furor, however you saw it, can't talk.
Furor.
Yeah, I have a hard time saying that word. Whenever you shift into bear form, you get 10 rage for free. So even if you're like off tanking, say you're off tanking something like a boss, you're trying to generate a threat and you're not getting attacked, if you can literally hit maul, shift in and out real quick, and before your next maul comes out, you'll have the 10 rage to use it. So really, as long as you have the mana to shift in and out, which you won't even need to do very often, because if you crit with a white attack, for example, you'll get like 40 rage, and that's at least 4 mauls. If you crit, you get 5 rage back every time. So long story short, druids have a very easy time generating rage. You're not going to be rage starved ever. That's another huge plus to having a feral druid.
That's crazy, dude.
Yeah, being rage starved is not a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's just crazy to see, like dude, there's a lot of like really strong benefits, like, now that I'm seeing it here in the talents and stuff like that. And real quick, guys, I see a lot of questions in the chat. We're definitely going to do a Q&A session at the end. So hold on to your questions. We will get to all of your questions, hopefully, at the very end. And yeah, just wanted to say that real quick. But sorry, go ahead, Skarm. Continue.
All right. So let's move down. Again, we just got Primal Fury. You have 21 points in the feral tree, correct?
I have 21, yes.
Awesome. So let's move over in the 4th tier to Predatory Strikes, which is 3 points. It's the tiger. Increases your melee. We need that to get Heart of the Wild, first of all, but it also increases your attack power by a bit, which is nice. By 150% of your level. So that's 90 free attack power at level 60. Moving we have improved Shred, which we're not going to get. That's a mandatory talent for Cat, which we'll get into. I'm going to redo the tree a little bit after this to spec for Cat form, but for now we're going to skip that. Moving down to the 5th tier, we're going to get both of these. We're actually going to get everything in the Feral tree below that, so you should have 33 points total. Savage Fury in the 5th tier increases the damage caused by your maul, rake, claw, rake, maul, and swipe by 20%. which really equals like 20% more threat because most of your threats coming from maul. Ideally, all your threats coming from maul. You want while tanking a boss, you generally want 100% maul uptime, like as much as you can, or as close to 100% as you can get. So this talent right here for 2 points, Savage Fury, it basically increases our threat by 20%, in addition to the 15% that we got earlier. So you might be starting to see why druids generate so much threat with their attacks. And going Feral Fire, Fairy Fire Feral, it's a mandatory talent, so you can use Fairy Fire in Feral form. It Fairy Fire is at a high, I would say at the highest level of raiding. That's the number one reason you bring a druid to raid is because of Fairy Fire debuff. It at level 16 at the max rank decreases the armor of the target by 505, which is key to reducing the armor to 0 or as close to 0 as you can. Which will just the 505 armor by itself that Fairy Fire reduces, it increases every melee's DPS by about 100-ish, give or take. But just so if you have 20 melee in the raid and no Feral Druid, or no Druid in general to put up Fairy Fire, that's a huge DPS loss in total. So Fairy Fire is a very important debuff. It's great to have in bear form also. Having a Feral Druid, I will say also, Resto Druids can use Fairy Fire, but getting them to actually Fairy Fire like the boss is like pulling teeth most of the time because they're either focused on healing or whatever else. So, you're constantly having in your mind Resto Druids, even like good Resto Druids that, or Nax, like a lot of the time you're going to have to remind them to drop Fairy Fire. And even then, you might not have it. Whereas if you have a Feral Druid in the raid, there's no reason not to use Fairy Fire in Feral form because it's free. 6-second cooldown only, but it doesn't cost any rage or energy. And you can just use it because you're attacking the boss or the mob anyway. So Fairy Fire uptime is a lot better with Feral Druids in the raid, just because it's a lot easier for a Feral Druid to practically use. And so moving down, we have Heart of the Wild, which is one of the best talents I would say out of any class in the game. It increases your intellect by 20%, and when you're in bear or dire bear form, 20% stamina and 20% strength in cat form. Huge for just 5 points. It's a lot of benefits. This talent is when we in a bit we'll go to the Feral Resto build. This is why you can like be deep Feral and still heal, because you have 20% more intellect, which is enormous. And this is also why bears have so much stamina, because any stamina that we get, whether it's from gear or like powered fortitude buffs, doesn't matter. Any stamina that druids have, you get 20% more in bear form just because of this talent. So that's why druids have, like, even in like max level gear, druids are going to have more health than warriors typically.
What's like the max health a druid can get in vanilla?
About 15,000.
That's big, dude.
I've gotten like close. I've seen screenshots with that much. In my practical gear, like fully world buffed, flask and everything, I have about 100 and I have like 14.7, 14.8, something like that. But yeah, a lot of health. Like you should, and armor cap, of course, because you're a druid. So like, what's like? So hearing that number, like I remember on my first video, even I read comments like, "Oh, you can't do this in vanilla. As a druid, you're just gonna get crit in one shot." Like, tell me what boss will crit you through 18,000 armor for 15,000 health? Like,
oh my god!
Besides like Resuvius, which you can't tank, besides like gimmick bosses where a player shouldn't be tanking them anyway, or like a boss that enrages, you know what I mean? Like no boss is gonna crit you for that much, or even 2-shot you or 3-shot or 4-shot you with that much health and armor. Like,
Yeah.
if healers are just halfway paying attention, you're not going to die.
That's crazy, man. And like it makes a lot of sense. I mean, this is kind of PvP oriented, but I'm not sure if you've played on the Henhouse server. It's just like a dueling server that a couple of guys in the community set up. And I've noticed that for the most part, I can beat druids, even the best druids. I can beat them for the most part on my warrior. But I came across this druid recently that, because most druids try to kite you, they'll try to dot you up. Like Soda Pop will dot you up and he'll kite you. And, you know, you got to keep up with him basically. And you got to know when to apply hamstrings and stuff like that. Duel this random druid, never heard of him before. And basically he just completely, he just sits there in bear form. And there's nothing I can do. Like there's nothing I can do. He just puts on his dots, sits there in bear form, auto attacks me, maul every once in a while, and I can't do anything. And I'm like, why can't I hit this guy? It's like, yeah, it makes sense. You know?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, like against warriors or rogues, yeah, I just stay bear form. Is what there was this I was a couple weeks ago. I was going to this is a couple months ago actually. I was going to AQ 40, and I was like, or maybe I was just in the area by myself. I forget why. Maybe after a raid, but I'm running toward the portal, and there's this horde warrior, and like he had Might of Mantle, he had the Zod mace. Like, you know, I recognized his gear. He had like full Biss, and I wasn't really gonna fuck with him, but he charges me, attacks me, and I ended up, and he popped like sappers and cooldowns and everything, and I pretty much stayed in bear form the whole time, and I ended up beating him. And the reason why this is funny is because there's some people on Horde that I know. I guess he was already pissed because he like died on a boss or something. I guess what happened, why he was out there, was because he died on a boss, lost all his buffs, so he's just mad, and he went to go zone in, but there was a fight in progress, so he couldn't zone in yet, and he was just like mad. He's like, I guess he was saying Discord, I just want to kill someone right now. I'm gonna gank the next alliance I see, and which was me, and I end up beating him, and I guess he just like was screaming and throwing shit. Like someone told me later on that after I ganked him, he was just like, I think he threw his headset across the room or something. So mad. But yeah,
dude.
like because druids in bear form, you just have so much health and armor. It's like melee is, and plus, as far as warriors are concerned, and you need to either do or take damage to generate rage. So like if you're hitting a druid with an auto attack for like 200, if that, like you're not going to get a lot of rage from that. So you're not going to have, you really can't use your moves, you know?
Exactly. It's like I tried everything. I tried going putting on 5 Sunder stacks, using DRE. I just like could barely hit him.
What's also as far as Sunders goes, 5 Sunders reduces armor by 2250, which if a druid has 15,000, like that's not much still. He's still gonna have like, you know, like, so unfortunately, even like I Sunder sometimes in PvP depending. Not often, but like even on a druid though, like it doesn't, even 5 Sunders is not gonna do much. Like I'll do a rogue sometimes, and they'll put exposed armor on me, which I just laugh about. I'm like, you know, it doesn't do anything. Like, you know, like use rupture or something else instead. So yeah, druids. Yeah, if a druid just sits in bear form, like I have a hard time. Like I've lost to, and I know how to play a druid. You know, I know how to play warrior, and I've dual druids on my warrior, and just, you know, I've lost because, you know, another thing also is as a druid, if I'm fighting a warrior, I'm gonna pay attention to his PvP trinket, because druids I can stun and bear for 4 seconds, and I can root. And druids also have, do you still have the talent calculator open? Actually, let's go over the balance tree real quick.
Yeah, let's go.
And so let's get 5 points into Nature's Grasp, which is the little claw. That is a spell where it's a PvP spell, but we have to get something to get, you know, further down the tree, and improve wrath is a waste. But having that spell, it's a buff. You buff yourself with it, and then the next time you get hit, the target gets rooted. So if I stun you in bear form, and you trinket out of it, I'll shift out and pop Nature's Grasp, and then just travel form away, and heal myself to full. Maybe dot you up a little bit, and then go back into bear form. And I'm at full health. You're rooted with like Moonfire and maybe Insect Swarm on you. And, you know, so that's how like druids beat warriors. Like it's a combination of just staying in bear form, and then like knowing when you can root them or stun them and get away for a bit so you can heal.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, but anyway, moving down the rest of the tree. or the balance tree. Our next talent that we get is 5 points in the natural weapons, which is the little wrench looking thing or whatever that is. It just increases all your damage by 10%, which again, since Druid threat is warrior threat is mostly based on damage, but warriors also have a lot of threat modifiers like Sunder Armor, which doesn't do any damage, but it does high threat. Revenge does a little bit of damage, but it generates high threat. Druids, on the other hand, all our threat comes from Maul. Like 95% of our threat comes from Maul. And so the more damage Maul does, the more threat you're generating. And the way Maul also works is, again, it takes the place of your next auto attack. And it does however much damage you do with Maul, you multiply 1.75, and then you multiply, in addition to that, you multiply 1.495, which comes from being in bear form in the Feral Instinct talent. That's just another modifier you get. That's the threat the Maul does. So, like, pulling up the calculator real quick. Say you Maul for 500. You multiply that by 1.75. And you multiply it again by 1.495. And you get about 1,300 threat. So if a Maul for 500 does about 1,300 threat. Oof. Which, yeah, so think about that. Like, think about a Warlock Shadow Bolting for like 2,000, which is, low end game, I understand. But combined with the, being, if you're far away, if you're max range from a boss, you need 30% more threat, like, to pull out the boss. But yeah, hitting for, anyway, the even caster is doing a lot of damage. The Druid is still generating more threat typically just because of how well Maul scales. And if you crit with that, so just imagine, so for 500, a 500 Maul is going to hit for, it's going to generate 1308 threat. However, if let's say we crit with Maul and it does 1,000 damage, calculate that real quick. Should have had these in front of me already, but.
No problem, dude. Quick maths, man.
Now all of a sudden it's, so 2,600 threat, obviously doubles, but yeah, so just when Maul crits, your damage just increases, or your threat just increases exponentially. So all these like talents that we have where increases threat by 15%, damage by 20%, damage by 10%, all that, it just really adds up. And then, so we get natural weapons, and then our last talent in the balance tree is going to be Omen of Clarity, which is right below natural weapons. It's a buff. It's a self buff. It lasts 10 minutes, which is too short in my opinion. A lot of the time, like, I'll forget to rebuff it, and you have to shift out to buff it as well. So you can't just like do it in the middle of a boss fight while you're tanking. But this talent is nice. It doesn't, even without this talent, this is more of a cat talent, but there's nothing else really to get instead. Randomly it's just a clear casting talent where, whenever you melee, you have a chance to proc clear casting, which reduces the energy or rage cost or mana cost of your next spell by 100%. So it gives you a free ability, basically. That's more important for cat DPS. It's nice for bear, but again, like I said earlier, we don't really have rage problems to begin with. So it certainly helps, but it's not mandatory. Later, when we do the Feral Resto build, we're not going to get Omen of Clarity, but it's not a big deal. It's not even really noticeable while tanking, really. Mm-hmm. And so our last two talents, let's go over the Resto tree and get improved in rage, which is in rage is 1 minute cooldown. Warriors have a move called Blood Rage, which is similar. Their move, you take a little damage and they get 10 rage and then another 10 over 10 seconds. Druids in rage gives you 20 rage over 10 seconds, but you take a little bit of an armor penalty while using it, which is usually negligible. But with this talent, you also get 10 rage instantly. So between, like I said earlier, like if you shift out before a boss fight, Druids can't, you lose all your rage. So you can't pull rage for a boss. However, if you have Furor, which you get, every Feral Druid gets that. You shift in bear form, you get 10 rage, and then you pop in rage, you get 10 more rage, and then 20 rage over 10 seconds. So you can start any boss fight with 40 rage at least, just from that alone. Even if you don't, which you could also call that an advantage because as a warrior, you can't always pull rage for a boss fight, and honestly, that's something that like 99% of warriors don't even do. So, or if like, say you're in a casual guild and it takes 5 minutes before pulling a boss because you have to explain it to people, your rage is going to drain to 0 anyway. So as a druid, you can always start a boss fight with 40 rage, no matter what. just from shifting into bear form and using enrage. So that's I would call that an advantage, honestly, over warriors, because warriors can't always do that. And as a druid, 40 rage is enough to just, that's enough. That's enough rage.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so druids have the advantage in that, I would say.
And
But
then
that's the tree.
I think I'm missing one point. I'm guessing leader of the pack, right? Yeah. So,
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, leader of the pack.
So, leader of the pack. In terms of why don't we see more druids with this talent? Is it just not worth it? Like, why don't we see more druids with this talent buffing warriors, basically? Why, and rogues? Why is this why is this talent like I mean, we're only going to bring probably around 3 druids to our raids at most, and most guilds do the same. Why is it that this talent isn't utilized enough?
I would say because real quick, I would say a simple answer is that if the druid's not full feral, if you're a resto druid or even hybrid, which we'll talk about in a second, if you get feral, if you get leader of the pack, there's no way you can get nature swiftness in the resto tree.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and nature swiftness instant heal. Druids have, even without any like plus healing at all. So let's say you have 0 plus healing, max rank nature's touch or healing touch, sorry, is going to heal for about 2,000.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge heal at the max rank, and Nature's Swiftness makes it instant every 3 minutes. So that's just like, it's a great talent for saving, tank, saving someone else who's dying. Like any resto druid should have Nature's Swiftness. Is the main reason why you don't see more leader of the pack.
Mm-hmm.
Because you'll typically only have 1 at the most 2 feral druids in a raid. Like, I wouldn't really recommend bringing 3 ferals to a raid. So at most you're going to have 2 ferals with, or probably just 1 with leader of the pack. So, I mean, that's the reason why, I guess you could say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, then that's the talent tree.
Though,
yeah, it is a nice talent. And that is the build, guys. That is the Feral Druid Tank build. If you guys want to screenshot this or copy and paste it, I don't know what you guys want to do. In fact, I'll actually link the build right here in the chat just to make it easier for you guys. You can save this link for later. So let's go ahead and move on to the gearing and pre-raid Biss. And I know you just made a video on this. And guys, for those curious, Skarm does have a YouTube channel, and out of everybody in the vanilla scene, and I talked to a lot of guys in the vanilla scene, his videos are probably the highest level tanking videos right now, period. In fact, I wouldn't say anybody comes close right now. So I'm going to go ahead and link this video right here in the chat. Please subscribe to him. Give him a little sub right there. Turn on the little bell for the notifications too. His videos are great. And not only do they teach you about druids, they teach you about warriors, fury prod. He's got videos on paladin tanks, really anything and everything tank. I mean, like I said, I think Skarm is like the cider helm of the classic community, if you remember cider helm from Tank Spot. So definitely a great resource for all things tanking. But yeah, let's go ahead and go into this pre-raid Biss stuff.
And I will say real quick that first of all, I appreciate anybody who subscribes and everything. I release videos at least at the latest like once every 3 days, usually faster than that. And I have about, right here, I'm just looking at my list, I have about 40 videos like that I'm working on right now. Not all at once, but I have like the next 40 videos planned, and I'm coming up with new ideas faster than I can put them out. So expect just a consistent content from my channel. Tune in, check it out frequently for updates.
There you go, dude. There you go. And hey, it's great to see you growing, Skarm. And honestly, guys, like again, I can't say it enough. Like, high level content from a very experienced player with a lot of end game experience. Like, if you're gonna play tank and classic, you need to be sub to this guy. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Skarm.
So you want to talk about pre-Biss now? You said.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure. So I would say go ahead and give you this link right now. That's the. Hold on.
I've got the page open from your video right here.
You did? Is that the? I just opened up the old one by accident.
Oh, you know what? This is okay. Yeah. Let me see if I can find this. Okay.
Let me go to my own video. I think that's the correct link. Let me see.
The Taladrills list, right?
Yeah, but it's both of them are Taladrills list. One of them's updated. So okay, you clicked on the one from my video. That should be the correct one.
Okay, perfect. Got it here.
All right. So this list is just for any spec that you. This is just bear specifically, actually. But yeah, this is the definitive list for feral tanking. Everyone interested should, like, I'd say, bookmark this list. And really, it just goes down the list, and it really goes far into, like, even before Priebus. Like, some of the I'm looking at the helm section right now. Some of the bottom helms are like level 50 helms, level 40, 45 even. So it's yeah, this list will really cover almost any point in vanilla, especially when you just hit 60. And before you hit 60, just get what you can get. Don't really worry too much about, like, I would say don't invest too much time into, like, researching, what drops where while leveling. Just get what you can get and enjoy yourself. But as far as when you hit level 60, this list will cover really any point of gear level that you're at. And so it's what I will say about Priebus is, while this sheet does, like I said, it's a really good guide for what's better than what. However, as a tank, you generally want to and I mentioned this in my last video, where as far as Priebus goes, DPS, it's more straightforward because it's easy to calculate what items do more damage, right? There's ways to calculate it to where you can, lump together like hit rating, crit, all that, just to figure out the overall DPS of the item. And so obviously, a DPS, you want to go for the highest DPS gear. Simple. For tanking, though, you also not only have to worry about threat, which is kind of the equivalent of DPS as a druid. The more damage you do with Maul, the more threat you generate. Not only do you have to worry about that, but you have to worry about surviving as well. So mitigation is also important. So with that being said, it's not always as straightforward. I have a list. Do you want to?
Getting a little robotic there.
You
still there? It's a little robotic. Hold on one second.
What about? Okay, let me know.
Oh, there it is. Much better now.
Okay. How do you want to do this? Do you want to go over the items one by one, like when you first hit 60, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, let's start with pre-raid Biss phase 1, because I think that's going to be the most relevant for most people.
Sure. So all right, so we have the list open. Let's scroll down to head.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at, do you kind of see like where it says like bone ring helm, tired leather hood?
Yeah, the boner helm, I see it. Yeah.
So like bone ring helm is, and I said this in my video too, that as far as pre-raid Biss, like, get so for example, bone ring helm and Shadowcraft helm, which is Shadowcraft is even above bone ring. So like Shadowcraft helm, as you can see on the list, bone ring helm has more stamina, but Shadowcraft has more agi. So in total, like tank points, Shadowcraft generally wins out. So I would say the highest helm on this list for pre-Biss is Shadowcraft. I have Mask of the Unforgiven in my video, which is a ways down, but it gives 2% hit, which hits very hard to come by for a druid. And like if you miss a few mauls in a roll, if you miss a couple mauls back to back, like that sucks. You might lose aggro that way. So hit's important. So I would go with Mask of the Unforgiven personally, but if you want mitigation, go Shadowcraft cap. So that's what I was getting at, for example, when I said like it's not always as straightforward for a tank. Because both of these items are pre-Biss. They're both from 5-mans, but they're quite far apart from each other on the list. So is that kind of what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So for a helm, I would either say Shadowcraft or Mark of the Unforgiven, or both, if you can get your hands on both. Moving on to neck. Neck is a little easier. I would go with Talisman of Evasion. It's kind of in the middle of the list. This is everything above it is either from phase 2 or raids. So that's just it gives 13 agi and 1% dodge. It's a nice neck for mitigation.
Where do you get it from?
Low Blackrock Spire. From War Master Voon. Yeah, so that's I don't like Lower Blackrock Spire.
Yeah, I was gonna say everybody's favorite instance. Yeah,
I know, right? But fortunately, it is from one of the bosses. A lot of the times in Lower Blackrock Spire, people will do what's called a 3-boss run, where they kill the ogre, they kill the Shadow Priest, and they kill War Master Voon. 2 of those bosses drop gems for the Uber's key, and the Shadow Priest drops a pre-Biss crossbow for hunters, and a few other cool things. So and those are pretty quick runs. Talisman of Evasion drops from one of those bosses. So know that if you ever see anybody in Classic saying looking for more Lobers 3 boss run, and you're trying to get Talisman of Evasion, you can join that run, and it might drop. So
Nice.
that's handy to know. At least you don't have to do the full run. And so moving on to shoulders, let's see. We have scroll all the way down. I don't see the shoulders I'm thinking of because they're different suffix. I don't see them at all. So let's go to itemization.info. It's a nice quick site.
Shout out to Meiji. Okay.
Shout out to Meiji for sure. And type in Alto. Here, I'll just send you the link right now.
All right.
Okay, click on that link right there. Just Discord you it. So does that pull up?
That pulls up.
All right. So these shoulders, as you can see, they're random enchantment. They'll either be like of the monkey, of the bear, whatever. Of the monkey or of stamina are the two that you want to go for. Monkey gives about 13 agi and 13 stamina. And of stamina gives about like 21 stamina. The special thing about these shoulders is that they're have 193 armor. Which if you look at, let's go all the way up to Mantle of Wicked Revenge, which is on the list, which is the third one on the list. I still use those today for tanking. Those drop out of AQ40. These shoulders have less armor than the blue ones. Mantle has 170 armor if you have it pulled up. And Altai has 193. So that's one thing that you want to keep an eye on always as a Feral Druid is the amount of armor that certain items have. Because unlike later expansions, I forget what point they changed this. I think I was still playing at the time. I think during Wrath of the Lich King or maybe TBC. A piece of armor that has high armor on it compared to other items of their level, the armor is in green. Just, how normal stats are in green. The armor itself is in green too. Well, in vanilla, it's not. So you might, it's pretty easy to look over the fact that like these blue shoulders have the most, or some of the most highest, the highest armor in the game compared to other shoulders. But just pay attention to what armor that each item has. But these shoulders, the Altai shoulders, they're you can actually solo farm them at level 60. They drop from Sunken Temple. There's like these 6 troll mini bosses that you have to kill before jumping down and completing the instance. You can stealth to all of them quite easily, and you can either solo them, or if you don't quite have the gear to solo them yet, which even in greens they're pretty easy to solo level 60 because they're only like level 50 bosses. You can always bring like another druid or rogue with you to me. Like 2 people can definitely take on one of them, and so you can kill 6 of them per instance. Each one of them has a chance to drop shoulders. Obviously you have to get the shoulders in the right enchant, so it's it can be farm, but you can do 6 bosses per lockout, and you can either solo it in 2-man it without fighting any trash. So I would recommend that any druid farm these shoulders, or you might just get them while running Sunken Temple.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would recommend those over anything else during phase 1. Those are really your best option. But anyway, let's go back to the Taldra's list. Moving on to the Cloak. We have, let's go to, where the hell is it? Looking for Stone Shield Cloak. I'm not seeing it.
Stone Skin Gargoyle Cape right here?
No, not that one. Stone Shield Cloak. It's actually way higher on the list than I thought. It's down in, let's go down to Cloak by tank points. Let's go then, because I see it right here. Stone Shield Cloak.
There it is.
Oh, there it is. I was missing it before. I skimmed over it. But yeah, Stone Shield Cloak, that's a BOE out of BRD. It gives 190 armor, and you can pull these up if you want. It gives 190 armor and 6 stamina. This is just, it's a BOE, but there's no other cloak in phase 1 that really compares to this. If you can't manage to find this like on the auction house, or if you can't get it to drop, just get any cloak with like, does Stone Skin Gargoyle drop in phase 1? Let's find out. Go to Itemization. That is off a rare spawn in Undead Strath, but it looks like it's from phase 1. So I would say Stone Skin Gargoyle Cape. It has better stats, but as you see, the armor is a lot less. That's what makes Stone Shield Cloak so good. It's because it has 190 armor. So Stone Skin Gargoyle is also a viable option. I would say get that if you can't get your hands on Stone Shield. But anyway, let's move on to chest. For your chest, you can either get, I would say, Mixologist Tunic, which is, do you see where that is? It's kind of on the lower half of the list.
Ooh.
Yeah, Mixologist Tunic. Because of this used to be a crappy item. However, it got updated in 1.10, along with as we know from the recent update that Blizzard gave us. All currently existing items, all items that existed from launch, are in their 1.12 state. Mixologist Tunic is one of these items. It was available from launch, but used to be green with crappy stats. Now it has 18 strength, 18 stam, and 11 agi. It doesn't have high armor, but there's no high armor chest available yet from Biss. So, but this is a great option to get if you have gold, if you have a lot of money and you can manage to get it. Let's move up to Breastplate of Bloodthirst. You see, it's kind of higher on the list.
Yep.
That's from Pristine High of the Beast, which you kill the beast in Ubers, you skin it. On a fresh server, that might go for like 1,000 gold, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. That's what if you get that and a few other items, you can get Breastplate of Bloodthirst, which this will last you until BWL. This is an amazing chest. If it was easier to get, I would recommend every druid get it without question. I can understand if you don't can't afford this. I understand it, but if you can get your hands on this, this is definitely this will last you a long time until phase 3 easily.
Nice.
So moving on to wrists. Really only have one option that I would recommend for wrists, and it would be Black Mist Arm Guards. It's kind of in the middle. Reason being is because, again, it drops from Ubers. It has strength and stamina, nice stats, and it also has 1% hit, which hit for druids is, it's hard to get because I've thought about this a little bit. Like, a lot of the rogues get, I think, a lot of their hit, first of all, from talents, but they also have, like their tier set, like Night Slayer. There's a lot of pieces with hit, Bloodfang, so on and so forth. Druids don't have any tier gear that gives hit, and for a while, Blizzard didn't really make any leather gear that gave hit outside of rogue tier gear. So it's hard for druids to get hit. This is one of the few items that actually gives them hit. You're gonna wear these bracers until like E40, to be honest. You're gonna have these for a while, so go ahead and get them out of the way, farm them as soon as you can.
Real quick on hit, somebody's asking if 4.6% is enough hit. How much hit do you need as a feral tank?
Yeah, the hit cap for feral, since we're not dual wielding, it's 9%. Getting like 4 or 5 is a good number. You don't need to be hit capped. Like even right now, my druid, I'm sitting at like 6% hit typically, and that's fine. It really is. So, the more hit, the better. Up until 9%, but really I would say it starts to lose a little bit of value after 5%. So if you have, 4 or 5% hit, like for example, if you have these wrists, even these wrists plus the mask from earlier, that's 3%. Like that's good walking into Molten Core. Like 3% will get you by.
Absolutely. And real quick, Skarm, welcome everybody from Stay Safe Stream. Thank you so much for the host, Stay Safe. I appreciate it, man.
Hey, what's going on?
The Spurg army is coming in.
Thank you.
For everybody coming in from the stream, again, thanks, Stay Safe, for the host. I am sitting here with Skarm, who is one of the best tanks in the vanilla WoW scene right now, makes great YouTube videos, and we're discussing Feral Druid tanking, which can be done in Naxxramas, which we learned today. So, Skarm, real quick, for the guys coming in right now, how far have you tanked on a Feral Druid in vanilla?
I've tanked all throughout vanilla. I've tanked. There's only about 3 bosses that I haven't tanked. In Nax, there's only Lotham and Saffron that I haven't tanked. My second video, actually, that I uploaded on my channel, if you go back, is me tanking Kel'Thuzad. So last boss of the game, main tanked him on Druid. Druids can tank most content in vanilla just fine. And they have some benefits over warriors as well, mainly due to the threat that they can generate.
Yeah. That's awesome. So he's tanked pretty much every raid in vanilla, main tanked as a Feral Druid. If you're interested in Feral Druid tanking in Classic and you want to see some of the rumors dispelled, stick around. We're continuing here with the pre-raid best in slot list. And, okay, somebody says I sound like Seth Rogen. Do I sound like Seth Rogen? Everybody keeps saying this. I don't sound like Seth Rogen, okay? No way. What? Really? Is it? Really? No,
you don't look like Seth Rogen, man, if you grew your hair out, but...
yeah, I don't look like him. I don't look for sure. I do. No. Okay. Stop. No, that's okay. Let's keep going. So wrists, we got him. Gloves next.
All right. So gloves, we took care of wrists. For gloves, unfortunately, this is another one you guys aren't gonna like. Let's go down to Slag High Gauntlets of the Monkey. Do you see them?
Yes.
These once again drop out of lower Blackhawk Spire, our favorite instance.
Amazing.
They drop off a boss late into the instance that you have to summon. You have to get items from the beginning of the instance, and like you have to get the first boss's head, and you have to get the pike nearby, and you have to put his head on the pike, and you summon Urok Doomhowl. That's a hard fight. It's a gauntlet. There's a bunch of ogres that spawn. It's pretty hard for like a 5-man group in Priebus to do, honestly. You actually have to like be organized and CC and everything else. And then when you kill the boss, not only might he not drop these gauntlets, but they probably won't be of the monkey that you want, right? They might be like of the weight. They might have like intellect or some shit that's useless. The reason why these are good though is because 207 armor. I think these are the second highest armor gloves in the game. Period.
For leather, yeah.
For leather is what I meant. And for a Feral Druid, because of our multiplier, because of our when we shift into bear form, these gloves in bear form. Let me do the quick math.
Somebody's asking, salad bakers have world fastest snacks clear, but they were server's second KT kill on Northdale. Or am I wrong? So salad bakers on Northdale is different than the salad bakers on Lightbringer for the most part.
Yeah, I wasn't there for. I don't play on Northdale. Well, I do, but I have like level 18.
Yeah. In general, a lot of the top guilds from Elysium, Lightbringer, and Nostalrius, a lot of them don't play on Northdale, at least from what I've noticed. Except like apes and stuff, but a lot of people took Northdale off. But yeah,
I think it's because it's so close to Classic. A lot of people didn't want to burn out.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let's did the math. You get 360%, 370% armor in dire bear form from if you have the talent as well, and that's on top of the just 100% in general. So, or 100% more rather. So if you, whenever you want to know a piece of armor in bear form, like so for example, these gloves have 207 armor. You multiply that by 4.6, 460%, and so these gloves actually give 952 armor, which is I think it's a lot more than tier 3 gloves for warrior.
Yeah.
So just that should paint a good picture of how like important and good armor is for bears. That these blue gloves from Lobers give like 300 more armor than tier 3 for warriors.
That's insane,
right? So yeah, that's really why like these gloves are an absolute pain in the ass to farm, but these are the only high armor gloves until AQ40. So you really just, if you can manage to farm these, do so. If not, there's some other items on the list. Like if we scroll down a little bit, we see like quick draw gloves, or those are phase 2. So let's find gargoyle slashers. Do you see them? Gargoyle slashers.
Gargoyle slashers.
They're right below Knight Lieutenant's Dragonhide grips.
Yep, I see.
All right, those are phase 1. Those have nice stats, and they even have some crit. But you see, they only have 107 armor instead of 200. So you're gonna lose actually quite a bit of armor because it's not just 100 armor you're losing. You're losing the percentage as well. So you're losing more like 500 from these compared to Slag Hide. But if you can't get your hands on Slag Hide, these drop out of Skullomance. They're pretty easy to get. So I would get these until you get Slag Hide, and then Slag Hide you won't replace until like AQ40.
Yeah, sure.
So moving on to waste, we have for Priebus. We can either get Frostbite Girdle or where the hell is it? Cloudrunner Girdle. Cloudrunner. Actually, let's go to Cloudrunner. It's higher on the list.
There it is. Okay.
Okay, so that has no. Actually, pull up Frostbite and Cloudrunner just so we can get a side-by-side comparison. So Frostbite has stamina and agi instead of agi and strength. So for tanking, agi and stam would normally be better than agi and strength. However, compare the armor of the two belts, and you'll quickly see why Cloudrunner is so good.
It's got double the armor.
Right, and that's something that I originally got Cloudrunner Girdle for DPS because it's the pre-raid Biss DPS belt as well. And so I got it for DPS, and it wasn't for like a month or a few weeks that I looked at it one day and I'm like, oh fuck, it has 185 armor. I didn't know. I overlooked it, Yeah. And so I started using that for tanking. So that's why you just really pay attention to how much armor items give you. Because you might get something that you just take a look at the armor compared to other gear because these are both the same level item. Cloudrunner is actually a little bit lower level. Just really pay attention to what armor certain items have. So anyway, so I would get both of those are acceptable for pre-raid Biss, but I would go for Cloudrunner. That's a little better. Moving on to legs, we have where is it? War Strife leggings. It's kind of spot in the middle, below Shadowcraft.
Got it.
Says Shadowcraft's a little better. So you could get those too. Go to both actually. War Strife, the stats are lower. The armor's about the same, but you get more dodge from the War Strife. So they come out to about the same according to the list. Shadowcraft's better for threat just because of the stats are better on it. So really, you could go for either one of these.
Quick question about dodge relative to druids.
Oh yeah,
So warriors traditionally, and correct me if I'm wrong, you don't really want dodge on your gear because you're trying to get hit because you're trying to generate rage off attacks.
this is correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Is it the same concept for druids, or are druids, naturally they get a lot more dodge because they're agility, but do you try to intentionally avoid dodge pieces or no?
No, you don't. For warriors, I disagree that I disagree with that and what you said is correct that a lot of people do say that like, oh, you don't want dodge because you want to get hit for rage, which is true. When you dodge an attack, you don't get any rage. So warriors, I've used the term rage starved so far. Rage starvation is absolutely a thing for warriors, especially the main reason behind specking Fury Prot and dual wielding, like I've talked about in a lot of my videos. The main benefit from that, one of the main benefits from that is it largely avoids being rage starved, because not only are you taking more damage, but you're doing more damage. So rage starvation for a warrior is a real problem. For a druid, like I've said, it's really not a problem. Even if you're off tanking and not taking any damage from the boss at all, you can still generate very respectable threat. Like for the most part, you would even hold aggro even if you weren't taking damage from the boss. You would still be able to generate more threat than everyone else in most cases, just because of how druids work. So to answer that, you could dodge every single attack on druid and still be fine for rage. So that doesn't apply for druids at all. Usually, I have more thoughts on it regarding warriors, which I'll talk about later in a different, on a video or whatever. But for druids, no, you want to dodge is really good for druids because that's also our only avoidance stat. And because we can't block attacks to not only reduce the, a little bit of damage that you reduce from blocking, but also to avoid being crushed or crit. Druids will get crushed and crit. That's a reality from a boss. You don't stack defense as a druid, and you don't have a shield to mitigate, or blocking with a shield just completely avoids being crushed or crit. Druids don't have that, so having a lot of dodge as a druid is nice. Even in pre-Biss, a druid will have like around 20, maybe even 25% dodge, which is 1 in 4 attacks you'll avoid, which is still, it's pretty good. Warriors have more avoidance in general because warriors typically have a little less dodge than druids, but they have parry, which druids can't parry at all. And they also have block as well, which isn't avoidance, but it reduces damage. Yeah. So, but as a druid, dodge is a great stat. It's besides armor and stamina, besides armor and health, dodge is really the only other way you're avoiding damage on a druid. So, and agility, not only do you get dodge from agility, but you get crit as well, which critting as a druid, not only do you get 5 rage back, like I've said, but the threat for maul just goes through the roof when you crit with it compared to when you don't crit. So agility is one of my favorite stats as a druid. I even like it more than stamina sometimes. Like the Cloud Runner girdle that we just linked, it has armor and has agi. Like it's okay that it doesn't have any stamina, as long as it has like those 2 stats. So yeah,
and,
dodge.
I'm sorry, real quick, again, just after the Stay Safe host, we are going to be having a Q&A at the very end of this, guys. I don't want to go on for too much longer before the Q&A, so we'll get ready to finish off pre-read Biss and we'll wrap some things up. Sure. Just because I don't want to take too much of your time, Skarm, too. But we'll go into the Q&A. So if you have any questions, don't worry about it. We'll get to them. Bear with us here. Let's finish off this list and go over a couple more things, and we should be ready. But yeah, sorry. Sure. Go ahead. We're on the feet now. Stay Safe's favorite piece, of course. Yeah. Sorry.
Is he a foot guy?
Oh, yeah, he is.
Oh, okay. Anyway.
Understatement of the year right there, dude.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
So I don't. Okay, so here we are. Shadowcraft boots. I guess Swiftwalker boots are a little. Are these even in phase 1? Let me double check. Swiftwalker. They are in phase 1. Either Swiftwalker or Shadowcraft boots, they're about the same. Honestly, they're not too different from each other. Both give 21 agi. Same amount of armor, and one gives 9 stam, one gives 7, but 4 strength. So there's better boots called ash covered boots, which let's just pull those up real quick.
Got it.
These boots, they do come out in patch 1.4. They drop out of Stratholme, so most likely they'll be available during phase 2, not phase 1. But if you either don't hit 60 until after phase 2, or if it's phase 2, keep these boots in mind, because these will last you until Nefarian drops his boots out of last boss of BWL. So you'll have these for a while. Not until phase 2, but get ash covered when you can. Until then, get either Shadowcraft or Swiftwalker for boots.
Nice.
All right, let's move on to fingers, as it says. Thralls, yeah. So Ring of Protection, which is kind of halfway down the list. That gives it's from a quest. It gives 150 armor and 9 stamina. Again, rings with armor is typically what you want to go for as a druid, just because of how armor multiplies. And so that's one previous ring. The next one is Thrall's Resolve, which is Horde only, but if you happen to be playing Horde, that's from another quest, and it's pretty much the same thing as Ring of Protection. So that's if you're Horde, get that. If you're Alliance, scroll down to I don't see it on here, but I would go for Nagel Ring. I don't see it on here at all. A lot of these are like not phase 1 rings though, so that's why I'm not going off this list for this.
What ring? I'm sorry.
Let's go to Itemization. Nagel Ring, Nagle Ring, one word. So, did it pull up?
Let me see.
Here,
yep, got it. Okay.
So let's look at the 1.10 version, which is what we're getting. 50 armor, 10 stamina. This is a really nice ring, actually. Drops out Blackrock Depths. It even gives some defense and a little 3 arcane damage Thorns effect. So this would be your second ring. You'd maybe want to get this anyway, even just for the Thorns effect, even if you're Horde. But as Alliance, definitely get Nagel Ring and then get Ring of Protection as well. So those are your previous rings that you want to go for.
Sounds good.
Moving on to
No, not okay. I see the chat. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Skarm.
What's going on, chat?
No, nothing. Come on, bros, dude. Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Oh boy. But anyway, moving on to trinkets. We at the very, very top, or the third top, we have Mark of Tyranny. That is from, and actually trinkets by tank points. It's at the, as far as mitigation is concerned, it's the best trinket in the game for mitigation. You'll never replace this for mitigation as a druid. Unfortunately, by taking this, you cannot get Black Hand's Breath, which is 2% crit. It's also a really nice trinket, but really, we gotta make choices sometimes in life. And in this case, I would get Mark of Tyranny as a druid, no question. Just because you don't replace this ever. Whereas Black Hand's Breath, you probably won't replace for a while, but you'll replace eventually. And that's mainly for DPS. As a tanking, we wouldn't even use it. So let's get Mark of Tyranny. And for our second trinket, we have actually Mark of the Chosen, which is, we can also get Smoking Heart of the Mountain, which let's pull that up too. You have to have enchanting to get that trinket. However, once you, because it's it's BOP, so you have to get the recipe and craft it yourself. But once you have that trinket, you don't have to have enchanting to wear it. So like on my druid, for example, I leveled enchanting up to 265. I made the trinket and then I dropped enchanting for, I think, engineering. And you can still wear the trinket.
So if I'm looking at this correctly, just want to make sure I'm looking at this correctly.
Yeah.
Mark of Tyranny is like practically best in slot for the whole game in terms of mitigation.
It is. It actually is. It's uncontested best in slot for mitigation.
Okay, and in terms of threat, the best one for threat, Mark of the Champion from the next quest, right?
Yeah, and that's undead only. So.
Okay, yeah.
Let's look at the second one, which is Mark of the Chosen.
Okay.
Which this trinket, you might look at this and be like, "What the fuck? It's green. Why is it so high on the list?" Well, if we read it, it says has a 2% chance when struck in combat of increasing all stats by 25 for 1 minute. Now, 1 minute's first of all, that's a lot of uptime, and a lot of the times when you get hit, chances are a lot of the time, once this trinket procs, before it expires, as long as you're in combat, it'll proc again, because 1 minute's a long time, right? And it can refresh itself and just go back to being 1 minute if it procs while it's already up. And 25, and imagine if you just had a trinket that said plus 25 strength, plus 25 agi, plus 25 stamina. That sounds amazing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what you're getting when this trinket procs. So it's not up all the time, but it's up a lot more, especially if you're faster paced and you're in combat more. If there's not as much downtime, this is gonna have a higher uptime. And as long as it's up 25 to all stats is better than anything you can get, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is from a Mardon quest for both factions. So this is easy to get. You'll get it while leveling up. And you can actually, if you're at all interested in a level 39 twinking, you can get this trinket at level 39. So, yeah, this is just an overpowered trinket to have for tanking. And so moving on to weapons, weapons are a little bit scarce in phase 1. When phase 2 comes out, let's go to down to Unyielding Maul. It's the 4th item on the list. And actually, let's open up a Warden Staff as well. These 2 items are, again, weapon DPS is irrelevant in Feral form. Only the stats matter. So these 2 items are the same, really. Like, if you look between the 2, they're almost exactly the same. Warden Staff is phase 1, but it's a BOE world drop. And as you can see, it's epic. So that's will cost at least, I would say, like 300-400 gold. Maybe even more on a fresh server. It is only, the reason why it's not super expensive is because it only is for 1 class and 1 spec. No one else but Feral Druid would ever want this. But for Feral, it's technically Biss mitigation throughout the entire game, just because of the armor and stamina defense it gives. So if you can get one of these in phase 1, great. If not, get an Unyielding Maul in phase 2. And until then, again, your weapon is not as important as a Feral Druid because the DPS doesn't matter. Your weapons are stat sticks, basically. So with that being said, you could even get like a green weapon of the monkey that gives Agi and Stam. As far as weapons go, don't. And there's also Crowd Pummeler as well, which even if you're not using the Crowd Pummeler, Crowd Pummeler still gives 16 Agi and 16 strength and 5 agility, which is respectable.
So when do you use the pummeler? Like as many times, like you bring like 30 to a raid and use them as many times, not that much.
No, you don't have to use it for trash. And also keep in mind that we're talking about bear only. For cat, it's always going to be a DPS increase. So, but you're going to use more as cat just because it's more damage than you can output otherwise. But as far as bear goes, you only use it for threat. You're only going to actually, use the Crowd Plumber's use effect for threat. When you're off tanking something, that's never gonna be an issue, because if you're tanking a mob that's not the kill target, by the time the first target dies, you're gonna have more than enough threat on that mob to hold it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Even while tanking bosses, like in Molten Core, you could get away with not using one at all Molten Core, because in pre-Biss gear, even without Crowd Pummeler, just because druids are less reliant on gear than other classes, when everyone else is in blues and the DPS isn't that high, honestly, you could generate more threat than anyone else quite easily, even without a Crowd Pummeler. You really could. And even if you want to use a Crowd Pummeler, usually only using it once per boss fight is more than enough to get the threat lead. You usually don't have to use 2, let alone all 3 charges. Usually one's enough. So honestly, for Molten Core, like you could get away with bringing like 2 or 3. And realistically, you don't need any for Molten Core. But as a tank, usually I bring like 4 or 5 to a raid with me, and that's always enough. It really is. I've never like run out, unless there's been like several wipes or something. But if assuming you one shot every boss, 4 or 5 Crowd Plumberers is more than enough for tanking. So yeah, you don't have to go crazy, and like as a cat, you have to bring a lot because you want to use all 3 charges boss to maximize your DPS.
Gotcha.
So cat druids they burn out faster, honestly, because of the that and everything else. But as a bear, I think I mentioned this earlier. Farming Crowd Plumbers, that's a deterrent for a lot of people, because on top of everything else you have to get, you have to farm Crowd Plumbers as well. But really, you don't need a lot to function as a bear. And they're 33. When you kill the boss in Nomergon that drops them, it's a 33% chance to get a Crowd Plumber. And as Alliance, it's easy to get there. You just go there from Ironforge. As Horde, either in Booty Bay or Ratchet, I don't remember which, there's a Goblin teleporter that teleports you straight to Nomergon. So Nomergon's pretty easy access for both factions. And you can do 5 runs in about 20 minutes. or maybe even sooner, and you can get 5 pummelers. You might not get any. Usually you'll get a few at least. So, and wall farming pummelers, that's an easy farm. It's level 30 instance when you're level 60. So you can be like watching TV. It's a chill farm. You don't have to be really 100% focused on it to do it. So really, I don't think that's a big deterrent for playing Feral Druid. And the payoff for it is like, as someone who plays a warrior and a druid, I would much rather farm Nomergon for crowd pummelers than get 2 bindings for fucking Thunder Fury, which might never happen.
Yeah.
It took me about around 50 lockouts to get both bindings, which is literally a year in real lifetime to get my Thunder Fury.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And you might take 2 years. You might never get it. You might get it soon. You might never get it. Fucking running Molten Core every week when you're in Nax gear to try to get these fucking bindings that won't drop. I hate it. I'm not looking forward to doing it. I might not do it again this time around, to be honest. Like, I don't know. I'll still run Molten Core, but I'm not going to stress on it as much as I did this time trying to get Thunder Fury. But for a warrior to compare with a druid and threat, you need Thunder Fury or like Nax gear.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a druid can run Nomergon. So think about that. Think about what sounds more appealing to you. Yeah, you have to farm multiple pummelers, but you have access to your Biss weapon all the time. It's pretty nice.
Yeah. And somebody's asking, do you lose the buff if you unequip the pummeler? I believe the
Yes.
answer is yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you do. Otherwise, you would see every warrior also Nomergon popping the buff for a boss fight and then putting on their normal weapons.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you absolutely lose the buff if you unequip it.
There it is. All right, so let's move on then to one-handers and offhands. Is there ever a situation where you want one-handers and offhands over a two-hander?
Not really. Let's go down to, for one-handers, let's go down to Rubidium Hammer, which is, you see it?
Yeah, I see it.
It's kind of a crappy weapon. This is really the only phase 1 excuse me. This is the only phase 1 one-handed weapon that's really like has armor on it. If we go to offhand real quick, at the very top of the list, you see Tome of Knowledge. This is also phase 1, drops out of Strat Live. This is the only offhand that even has like strength and agility in the game. So it's 8 + 8 all stats, but this is the only offhand that you'll ever have as a Feral Druid. It's because Blizzard didn't design anything else for Feral Druids really. So thanks, for one-handers, what's up? Yeah, thanks, Blizzard. So for one-handers, there's that crappy little Rubidium Hammer. But really, where one-handers start to come into play is when Feral attack power weapons come out. Now, this isn't for a while. The first Feral attack power weapon drops from a World Dragon, which is going to be released in phase 4. And then after that, AQ and Nax, which is phase 5 and phase 6. So for the first half of Vanilla, you're not going to have any of these. But when they do come out, there's certain weapons that when you equip them, let's click on the top one, the Blessed Kraji Warhammer. As you can see, that's 280 attack power in Cat Bear or Dire Bear form, which is huge. Still not as much as the threat from that. That sounds like a lot, right? 280 attack power, which it is. But the threat from 280 attack power does not even compare to the 50% haste that you get from Crowd Pummeler. Crowd Pummelers, if we go two-handed weapons, let's look at the top. Let's look at see the pink column that says threat.
Yeah. Wow.
Just look at the top 2 numbers and look at that. ATS, which gives 420 feral attack power, is only 210 threat, whereas Crowd Pummeler is 356. Not even close. So that's how insane manual Crowd Pummeler is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to farm multiple of them, but look how overpowered it is. It's worth it. And so yeah, that about covers Feral Pre-Biss.
All right. Are there any thresholds that we should be aware of? You mentioned hit 9%. Anything with armor thresholds or any other thresholds that we should be aware of?
So the armor, the soft, I don't know the exact number. It's about 11,500, give or take a few hundred. So between 11 and 12,000 armor is what's called the soft armor cap. What I mean by soft cap is that when you pop consumables, there's 3 armor consumes. There's Elixir Superior Defense, Crystal Ward, and Scroll Protection. Between those 3 buffs, those elixirs, which they're our buffs, 30-minute buffs. So those are buffs that you just pop before a boss fight. Between those three, those give 860 armor. If you pop a Stone Shield potion, a Greater Stone Shield potion before a boss fight, that gives 2,000 armor. And if you have Inspiration, the priest or shaman buff that when they crit heal you, you get 25% armor for 15 seconds, which all those stack, by the way. If you have around 11,000 armor with those three buffs, with all those buffs, then you hit the hard armor cap, which is it's between 17 and 18,000. And that's what will give you 75% reduction against bosses. So that's the soft armor cap, and that's the hard armor cap right there. And with the soft armor cap with the appropriate buffs, you'll hit the hard armor cap. And as far as thresholds, there's really no other like numbers that you want to aim for. I would say around like 20% dodge you can hit that in pre-Biss, 20% dodge. That's a good indicator of avoidance. Other than that, you just want to have the armor and then as much stam as you can get, which also in pre-Biss, in my video that I just made, in pre-Biss gear, I had about 5,500 health, which is quite a bit and that's no buffs. That's no buffs at all. No self buffs, no raid buffs. So that's quite a bit of health, actually. I would say above 5k. If you're a Feral Druid and unbuffed, you have above 5k health, I'd say you're doing good for as far as no raid gear goes.
Got you. Someone in the chat is saying dodge is useless. How do you answer that?
I disagree. To give a little more elaborate answer, I've heard the argument where it's like, oh, when you dodge an attack, you just get overhealed. It's better to just take damage and get heals. Sometimes you get crit. There's a lot of, in a perfect world, yes, but in real life, in a real raid situation, like you might get crit sometimes. Maybe the healer will, shit happens. In other words, like to put it simply, shit happens. And there's been a lot of times where I've been one hit away from death and I've dodged that attack and then got a heal. So dodge isn't useless. The only downside of dodging attacks is that you won't get rage from the attack that would have hit you, right? But as a druid, that's really not a factor ever. It's 99% of the time it's not an issue. You won't be rage starved regardless. So really, dodge only benefits you because if you have 20% dodge, that means 1/5 of the time you'll just avoid taking damage, which will let your healers relax a little bit, maybe focus on the raid if you're at full health, conserve some mana, whatever. So yeah, dodging is it's a little more complicated for a warrior, as I said, because of rage starvation issues. But for a druid, the more dodge you have, the better.
Absolutely. And with that, guys, we do have. I do want to talk about kind of the TPS rotation for druids and stuff like that. And but I think we should go into the Q&A real quick just to break up the pace a little bit.
Sure.
So if you guys have any questions for Skarm about druid tanking, feral druids, from Biss to any question that you guys have thought of this entire time, now is the time to ask. We'll get through as many questions as possible. Then we'll go into the TPS and how you rotate your rotation in a boss fight. And then we'll probably do some closeout there. So
that part's simple, so don't worry.
Yeah, there it is, dude. But before we get started here on the questions, real quick, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and link Skarm's YouTube channel in the chat. I highly recommend you guys check this out. Subscribe to Skarm if you are looking to tank in Classic. He does Druid videos. He does Prot Warrior videos. He does Two-Handed Fury videos. Or Fury Prot videos, I'm sorry. He does Paladin videos. Anything and everything tanking he talks about. And even if you're not tanking, he gives you a very high level perspective of the end game in Classic. So I highly recommend you check it out. That's his YouTube channel right there.
I even have for those interested, I even have a shaman tanking video, a brief one.
There you go. Gotta go
sort of
full meme, dude.
Some people might get that joke.
Yeah. So he's got 5,984 subs right now. I think we can get him to 6,000 right now. What do you guys think? He needs 16 more subs, and we'll get started on the questions as soon as he hits 6,000, which hopefully is very, very soon. 9 more subs away. We'll start taking questions. So the first question I see here is, does the 200 armor set bonus from Shadowcraft affect the total armor?
No, it doesn't. And that's something that I realized I left out of my last video. A lot of people asked about that in the comments. I'm glad someone brought that up. No, it doesn't. If you look at the Feral Druid, actually, let's pull it up so everyone can see. Let's go to Classic DB.
Okay.
Classic database real quick. just pull up Dire Bear form.
All right.
And let's look at the first one that says the actual tooltip. It says shape-tipped in Dire Bear, increasing melee attack power, and armor contribution from items by 360%. That's the key thing to note. What it means by items is simply the armor that the item itself gives you. Set bonuses do not count. Consumables do not count. Buffs do not count. Nothing like that counts. The only thing that Dire Bear form effect, I can't talk. Dire Bear, the only armor that gets buffed by a percentage is from your gear. So yeah, the set bonuses does not apply. You only get 200 armor.
Interesting. Next question. Is there any reason, this is from Fun to Own, is there any reason to shape shift while tanking?
Not in very, very rare instances. Like I said, if you have a good latency, like if you're not, you can, as I mentioned earlier, you can shift out to pop a potion. So like for example, if you are confident enough to do it without getting killed, let's say you're tanking a boss and you pre-popped a stone shield potion before the fight, which is 2 minutes of 2,000 armor. Let's say that wears off. Let's say the fight takes long and that expires during the fight. If you're skilled enough, if you can manage to do it, you can shift out right after an auto attack, right after the boss attacks you, pop a potion and shift back in before you get attacked again. So you're not getting hit out of druid form, which even if you're at full health, and you're actually wearing tank gear and you have, raid buffs and everything, you're still not going to get like one shot in if you shift out in druid form. You'll get hit hard, so you want to be careful, but like from full health, you won't get one shot. So if you can shift out quickly to like pop a potion, then that's about the only reason why you shift out while tanking like a raid boss.
Definitely. Next question comes from Steeler TV. Is there a cooldown on Pummeler when you equip it?
Yeah, 30 seconds. So you have to make sure to, and so when you use the Pummeler, there's no cooldown. So you can have 100, you can have 1 minute and 30 seconds of uptime. If you pop Pummeler, you pop it, and then 30 seconds later, you pop it again, and then so on. You, with the 3 charges, you have 1.5 minutes uptime. But then once that falls off, you have to put on a second Pummeler, which that's something else to note, which really this doesn't come into play. It almost never comes into play. But if Ferals will see a threat drop off after 1 minute and 30 seconds because either you have to put on another Pummeler and wait 30 seconds or just, equip your normal weapon instead. However, if you've been using a Pummeler 1 minute and 30 seconds in the fight, like chances are either the boss is dead or you're not going to lose threat. Your threat's going to be so far ahead that you won't lose that after that. But yes, putting on another Pummeler, a new Pummeler does trigger the 30 second. Like if you put on a trinket, for example, that you use, you have to wait 30 seconds.
Exactly. Paytime asks, and we talked about this at the start, but I think a lot of people that came in later probably missed this. How do you convince a guild to take you as a tank or DPS instead of a warrior tank or a rogue DPS? What advantages does a druid have?
Very good question. Druids I've talked about a lot of the advantages on this on the stream so far. In a lot of my videos, I talk about other advantages like we can shift out and heal for certain boss fights. A lot of my druid videos, probably all my druid videos in some way, talk about the benefits of bringing a druid to a raid. So there's a lot to talk about. I won't go into too much detail right now, but go ahead and check some of those out. As far as actually getting people to invite you, like I said earlier, there's a stigma surrounding feral druids. One way to solve that stigma is to educate people. Like, this might sound like a self-promotion, but link people to my videos. If people are questioning like, hey, can feral druids do this? Can they do that? Show them my content that I put out so far. And
congratulations on 6,000 subs, by the way. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much.
Bro.
I really appreciate it. But as far as, and I'll tell you actually a story as far as actually getting people to give you a chance. One time, my druid I was raiding AQ40 on my warrior for a while, but I hadn't so I knew the instance, I knew how to tank it, but I hadn't done it on my druid yet. And I was trying to get into a guild as a feral druid, an AQ40 guild, right? As a feral druid, and I talked to the guild leader, or the guy who was spamming recruitment, And he was like skeptical at first. I said like, hey, I want to raise a Feral Druid, and he was like, he's like, I don't know if we need a Feral Druid. What can you bring to the table? And in addition to, I briefly told him, everything like Druids can help heal sometimes. We can, generate, amazing threat, blah, blah. I briefly explained all that to him. Another thing that if you're not only as a Feral, but I would say any like meme spec, if like you want to play like a Ret Paladin or Shadow Priest or any spec that isn't generally considered optimal, be like have there's a lot of little things you can do, like be friendly, just be likable. One of the things that I did for that guild is that there's a trinket called Arcanite Dragonling, which costs about 400 gold to make, and it benefits the mages because it puts a fire debuff on the boss that makes them take more fire damage. As a druid, that personally doesn't increase my numbers at all, right? I got that trinket as a way to say like, hey, I'm willing to go above and beyond and I paid for it with my own money, my own gold, and I linked in that trinket. I'm like, I made this trinket to help mages do more DPS, to help the bosses die faster. So just being a team player, like really, there's a lot of little things you can do in vanilla to really contribute to the guild outside of raiding. For example, on raid days, you can help clear Diamol so that people can leech tribute buffs. You can bring pair bots to raid. You can help other people out with consumes with enchants. Just be a team player. In other words, like be a guild mate that other people they like, that they can count on, they'll help people out. So just be that kind of person. That helps a lot more if you're playing a meme spec, because that like there's in the guild that I was just raiding with recently on my druid last attempt, there's a paladin named I'll even give him a shout. His name's Dallas, who he's a Ret Paladin in Nax, which Ret Paladins, everyone we all know about Ret Paladins. They aren't the best. I have my own opinions on Ret Paladins. They're not the best DPS. But this is like one of the nicest guys you've ever met. Like he's always willing to help. He's like gone to raids. We do like a soft reserve system on Lightbringer, where like in Pugs, where you go to raid and you like reserve one item that you want, and everybody who reserved that item rolled for it. Some raids they'll let, like, if like let's say I go to the raid and I don't need any gear from it, I can reserve an item from someone else and like roll for it for them. Does that make sense? I've seen him go to countless pug raids just to like reserve loot from other people, like he's like, oh, I'm going to BWL to reserve Drake Fang Talisman for so and so. Most helpful guys I've ever met, and he has a great personality. Nobody minds when he gets gears ret. Like nobody minds, because he's a cool guy. So yeah, really, if you want to raid as any meme spec or just in general, but like as a Feral Druid, like show that you're willing to go the extra mile. Know your class first of all, because like one of the main reasons that I got invited to this guild was like he asked me, what can you bring to the table, and actually I demonstrated it. I'm like, I farm manual crop homer so I can generate threat. I have resto gear, I can help heal. Like I demonstrated that I know my class, and he invited me, convinced him.
Nice. And yeah, it definitely, like, selflessness is always the number one factor, I think, when it comes to guilds and who gets loot prio and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now Pyro I am is asking a very interesting question, because this is the video that I'm working on. I'm working on a video ranking all the classes from the most casual class, the most hardcore class in terms of time investment to reward ratio. Pyro is asking, what's the effort versus reward for bear tanking? Is it worth it for somewhat more of a casual player who wants to raid tank compared to warriors? I want to add to his question, compared to warriors. What's more casual friendly in terms of, I don't have to put as much time for maximum reward?
Druid. Druid definitely more casual friendly than warrior, which is, it's not to say that it's like only a casual class, obviously. But it, due to the fact that like you have to, like, gear's less important, rotation's less complicated. Druids are more like, druid tanking is more of a simplified version of tanking. There's a lot more that you have to do as a warrior tank. And not only that, but like with druids, there's one tanking spec. Like you sit in bear form and you tank. With the warrior, not only you have to get good at being a part warrior, but then eventually, once your guild, the DPS demands for it, you're specking Fury Prot, which is a whole nother game altogether. Like you have to relearn tanking almost. So, and gear and everything else, like farming bindings. Like, would you rather farm bindings as a warrior or farm crop plumber as a druid? So yeah, druids are definitely more casual friendly, and you have to invest less time in a druid to not only learn the class, but just to as far as the consumables go, they have to farm about the same consumables as a warrior tank does, which is a lot. But both classes, if you want to raid in any like serious manner at all, you should be farming consumables. That's more or less a raid requirement in general. So that's a topic altogether. That's another topic altogether. But as far as just individual classes go, especially when comparing druid to warrior, if you are pressed for time, if you don't have as much time to put in the game as you like, I would say definitely consider a druid.
There you go. There it is. Next question comes from Super DU. He says, "Thanks, Skarm, for the info. This is great. 2 questions. We'll start with the first one. Is there any value in having druids build initial aggro with Pummeler and have a warrior taunt off to carry the momentum through?"
Yeah, you could. The thing is that a lot of bosses, especially like in AK-40 and Nax and even BWL, are immune to taunt. So for the most part in vanilla, like taunt is not something you can always rely on, period. Like I said, a lot of bosses are just immune to it. And even as far as like, yes, what you suggested, that would hold merit, where if a druid could generate initial threat and then a warrior could taunt off. That could apply to anything in general. Like a hunter could pull with aim shot and crit, and then someone could taunt and get all that threat from aim shot. So that just really apply anything that's tauntable. As long as warriors are taunting it, like threat is more or less a non-issue with mobs that are, or even bosses that you can taunt.
There you go. And his second question is, it's a non-tanking question. What is the value of Hurricane due to the 25% attack speed debuff? And do you recommend it be used in raids? Does it stack with Thunderclap?
None of the attack speed debuffs stack. Hurricane, Thunderclap is a 10% debuff. If you have 5 of 5 tier 2.5, which is the AQ set, it turns into a 15%. Thunder Fury is 20% reduced attack speed, and Hurricane's 25. So actually, Hurricane's better than Thunder Fury as far as the attack speed debuff goes. Unfortunately, it costs a ton of mana. It costs like 1,800 mana or something ridiculous at level 60, or 1,400 or something, and has a 1-minute cooldown. So you can't always use it all the time even. I don't really ever see druids hurricaning bosses just because, and it's a channel spell too, and you have to sit there for 10 seconds and do nothing but hurricane. So you can't heal, you can't do anything else while you're doing that. So you never really see it on bosses. It is actually a really good spell though for AoE tanking. Not you AoE tanking, but like for example, I did Molten Core the other day, and a warrior pulled those packs of imps before Lucifron. There's like 12 of them in a pack. A warrior was AoE tanking them, and I hurricaned them. And so that reduces the attack speed for every single imp by 25%, which is, you add all that up. That's a huge damage reduction for the tank. So Hurricane, I would say, is good for a situation like that when someone else is AoE tanking and you want to do damage and reduce the damage that they take.
There you go.
But you never really see it used on boss though.
Got you. This is a question from Morrigan Wow, who says, should Feral Tank be second or third tank optimally? I guess optimally, main tank, second tank, third tank. Where would you have a Feral Druid?
Yeah, I would say optimally you second or third tank. I would say optimally main tank for fights that really like Veil and Broodlord, for example, especially during even progression, but especially during progression. Again, threat's an issue on those fights, and you want them to die as fast as possible. So I would say if you're fighting a boss that threat is really like the top thing to manage, druids are usually better, unless your guild is running Fury Prot warriors. But that's more of an advanced thing in general. So if you're like an average guild progressing, or even just an average guild in general, like you're not going to be using Fury Prot warriors. So in a case where you need threat, druids are better just because of crowd pull more. But in general, optimally, druids are really good second or third tanks, I would say.
There it is. Here's an interesting question from Edith. He says, Skarm, you talked about all the raid content main tanking, but what about the world bosses? We're deciding between me going bear or warrior for guild main tank. Thank you.
World bosses. So there's 6 world bosses in vanilla. There's Azurgos, there's Lord Kazak, and then there's the 4 green dragons. Druids have no issue tanking any of those bosses. They don't have any kind of, they don't hit particularly hard. None of them have mechanics that really hinder a druid as opposed to a warrior tanking them. So if that's if world bosses are your concern, then druids can do everything that a warrior can. And like I was saying earlier, that the first feral, it's called Hammer of Bestial Fury. If you want to pull it up, Hammer. Just type in Hammer of B on the database, so it should come up. That drops off. That's the first feral attack power weapon available in the game, and it drops off of the green dragons, all 4 of them. So that's if you're a feral druid doing world bosses, then you have that to look forward to.
There you go. Let's see here. Can you use goblin, sappers, and bear? I'm guessing no. That is correct. You cannot use.
You cannot. Something that I have started doing recently, speaking of that, is like if you're Zolgrub comes to mind. There's a lot of packs in Zolgrub that there's a lot of mobs running around sometimes. You can shift out and pop Sapper and then immediately shift in. Like popping Sapper doesn't trigger the global cooldown. So you can even make a macro to where you hit Sap is when you're out of form, you can hit Sapper and go bear form instantly. So that by the time you pull threat from the Sapper, you'll be in bear form. So you can. That's another instance where like when the timing's right, you can shift out and use Sapper and shift back in. But no, you can't do it in bear form.
There you go. Okay, that looks like all the questions for now. We're gonna go ahead into the rotation for druids, for feral tank druids, I should say, and then we'll do some really quick Q&A at the very end as well, and then we'll wrap things up. So, sure. How you feeling, Skarm? By the way,
I'm feeling good. I ran out of water a while ago. Someone told me that I need water because my voice sounds hoarse, but so let me get a cup real quick. Let me get a cup of water and then I'll come back.
Sounds good. Stretch this a little bit as well. Dude, this guy knows his stuff, guys. He knows his stuff, man. Shido the Druid. Shout out to Shido. What's up, man? Great feral DPS Druid. One of the best in the world. 10 push-ups. Oh, I gotta tell you guys, I'm not drinking any water today, so it's tough. Tips, are you gonna swap to Druid now? You know what? Honestly, I'm obviously not, but I'm very much looking forward to a Druid alt. I think Druid alt would be really, really fun. With everything we know now, are ferals viable for an average player? I assume even feral tanks. It sounds like, according to Skarm, it sounds like it's more viable for an average player, for a casual player, just because the gear requirements aren't as intense, and the threat generated is so much higher. I would say, yeah. I think it's more viable. Tips, you ever going to do a feral DPS deep dive? Well, I'd love to. And the person I'd love to do it with is actually in the chat right now, I think. His name is Shido the Druid. I'm not sure about his schedule. We were supposed to do one a while back, if he remembers. But things just got chaotic, and I don't know, things fall through the cracks sometimes. But if he's up for it, I'm up for it. Maybe we could do it sometime. Do you still need to power shift in cat while using crowd pummeler? Yes, yes, I believe you do. You continue to power shift. Tips, you ever going to do a feral druid deep... Okay. See, this is why you gotta be careful with druid players, dude. They're all furries, man. God damn it. Tips, have you done a resto? No, I haven't done a resto. I think I might do resto with Eben, who's also in the chat. We got a lot of good druid players in the chat right now. What's up, Reese? There you go. Another fellow furry, dude.
Hey, I'm back.
All right. We're good to go. Sounds good, Sheeta. We'll definitely talk, man. We'll definitely talk. Okay. Rotation. I'm gonna go ahead and open up the paint document here, just for the quality production right here.
Here, me. Here, actually, and check Discord. I'm gonna send my rotation right now. Okay.
Okay.
Did you get that?
I got it. Okay, guys. It's very complicated. So let me go ahead and list this out. So Feral Druid Tank rotation. All right. So single target, I assume, right? This is single target.
Yeah.
Okay. So number 1, Maul.
That's it.
There it is.
But so for real, there's in bear form, You have, I'll go ahead and, there's only a couple of them, so I'll go ahead and list the moves right there. You have Maul, you have Swipe. Those are your 2 damage dealing moves, by the way. Swipe is, there's no reason not to use it on a single target if you have the rage for it. However, even that move will actually it will drain your rage pretty fast because you have it costs 15 rage and it has no cooldown. So if you're just spamming that, you will lose rage pretty fast. However, it's more worthwhile to have as many mauls as you can get instead of just white auto attacks than weaving swipe in the boss. Does that make sense? Because single target swipe only does, swipe is a static move. It doesn't, the damage doesn't increase based on your gear. And I'd say each swipe only does like 200, maybe 300 threat if you crit. It's not, you know, it's decent, but nothing compared to Maul. And so you don't want to be spamming swipe and then run out of rage to Maul when you could just Maul, in other words. So if you're just, especially with Crowd Pummeler, since you're attacking faster, you're mauling more and you're going to spend rage faster doing it. So I would say against boss, unless again you just have 100 rage even when you're spamming Maul, only use Maul against a boss, and then you swipe when you're tanking multiple targets.
Old Man Cannon asks, do you bark skin pre-combat, and when do you pop your cooldowns in general?
I don't always bark skin pre-combat. The reason being is because in vanilla, bark skin also reduces your attack speed by 20%, which is a threat loss. Usually even like with Pummeler in a casual guild, like that will still be enough. You'll still generate enough threat from Pummeler. So, but just be aware of that. Bark skin is nice for the damage reduction, but it also is a threat reduction as well. So just use it accordingly. And what was the second part of that question? I'm sorry. Oh, cooldowns.
Yeah.
So one, I've mentioned this in the video so far. One of the weaknesses of a druid tank compared to a warrior is that warriors have, shield wall, they have last stand, they have life-giving gem if they get that trinket. Druids have frenzied regeneration, which is honestly a pretty horrible move. It what it does is that when you use it as a 3-minute cooldown, you get is like 10 health or 20 health per rage point or something. Basically, it drains 10 rage a second, and you get 200 health per 10 rage drained, which is not a lot. I do pop it sometimes if I have an overabundance of rage or a threat sign issue, and I do feel like I'm taking a lot of damage. There's no reason not to pop it if you have a threat lead already. It will drain the shit out of your rage. It is a little bit of a heal. That's the only cooldown that druids have, though, really. So it's unfortunate. That is a definite weakness of druids, but it is what it is. We don't really have cooldowns like warriors do.
Got you. Skarm, do you ever taunt, limit invulnerability potion, bark skin, and then back into bear form?
Well, if you just did that, you would just lose threat, because as soon as you when you pop a limit invulnerability potion, which I'll go ahead and talk about real quick. When you pop a lip, it's a 6-second immunity, but it's also a threat drop. It's like if you blessing protection someone with a paladin, they won't, as long as it doesn't reduce their threat, their total threat, but as long as you have that buff on you, nothing will attack you. Does that make sense? So it's a temporary threat reduction. So there would be no reason to just lip and then bark skin, because you would just lose threat immediately as you start lipping. However, one thing you can do, this is more complicated for druids than warriors, but I'll just explain the concept. One of the coolest things about tanking, this is one of the coolest tricks a tank can do, in my opinion, and I just found this out a couple months ago, that you can AoE taunt, which both druids and warriors have an AoE taunt. You can AoE taunt and pop a lip at the same time, a limited vulnerability potion. Both of the AoE taunt 6 seconds and the lip is 6 seconds. And so what that does is you taunt everything around you and they don't deal damage to you. They're attacking you because you have the AoE taunt active, but they're just immune. Nothing's doing damage to you. That's like one of the most broken things you can do in vanilla, honestly. Like, even if like someone pulls extra packs, if a warrior, or it's hard to do on druid because we have to lit first and then shift into bear form and AoE taunt because you can't pop potions in bear. So it's a little harder on a druid to do, but doing that will just like save a wipe usually. And any warrior can do it, even if you're a warrior. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous technique.
Yeah. And somebody's saying here, Akura's saying 14-year-old game and we're still learning new things. Unreal. Absolutely.
Yep.
That's one thing I love about vanilla, like the way the itemization works and how unique every item and even the talent builds are. It makes it so theory crafting is not really intuitive or straightforward. And I love that. Like, if you go to any expansion afterwards, everything is straightforward and streamlined. You know what the best in slot gear is going to be in BC and Wrath. There's still a little bit of discrepancies, but I think especially in Cataclysm and onwards, things got super streamlined.
Yes, I've heard.
Yeah. Whereas back in vanilla, I mean, there's so many different calculations, so many different things to take into account. It's all percentage based. It's not rating based. So it's just the whole thing. But yeah, really really cool. Ultimation asks, do you enchant pummelers? I'm guessing not.
Not with real enchants, because that would just be pricey. What you can do though is there's a blacksmithing. Let's pull it up. Go to DB. It's iron counterweight. Counterweight's one word. This is as you can see, attaches a counterweight to a two-handed sword, mace, or axe, or polearm, which crab polearm is a two-handed mace, making it 3% faster. Which this does translate into bear form. Your attacks will be 3% faster in bear. Honestly, before phase 3 is when the 15 agi enchant should come out for weapon, because that didn't come out until 1.6. So for phase 1 and 2, this is really the only enchant that a Feral Druid will have, period, is this iron counterweight. Blacksmiths make it, it's pretty cheap. And so if you're gonna, not always, but a lot of the time, like if I go into a raid, I'll enchant my, if I can find a blacksmith handy, I'll have them put iron counterweights on my crab pummelers. Because it's a pretty, each one costs like a couple gold. So it's really not a super expensive enchant.
There you go. Skillwing asks, what spec would you recommend for gearing up for Molten Core and Onyxia, doing dungeons, etc.? Resto, Feral DPS, or Feral Tank?
So there is, I'll go ahead and link it in the, you can go and link it in the chat instead of me. It would take me a while to go through the talents one by one again. But I have a video that is me explaining my Feral Resto build. And this is a spec that with just one spec, so you don't have to respec, you could do, you can heal or tank quite effectively for both, actually. And so I'll go ahead and you can link it in the, here, I'll go ahead and link 2 videos. Right. I've one video explaining the spec, and then I have another video of me raiding with it.
I know I've seen it before.
Yeah, sorry, I'm pulling up links right now.
All right. There it is.
And then that one. So, but yes, with this spec, you can really you're missing out on like cat talents basically. That's what you're really missing with the spec. So your damage sucks, but as far as tanking and healing, you can do both pretty well. So I would definitely this will. I just discovered this spec like a month or 2 ago. Not too long ago is when I first discovered this and really started playing with it. For classic, this is going to be my, at least at first, I would say when I first hit 60, this is going to be my spec. Unless people give me shit for not, you don't have leader of the pack in the spec, the 3% crit ore, so you don't have that. So depending on what the guild needs at the time, I might just respec full feral. But this is definitely a great spec for just healing and tanking. 5 bans, even raids. And leveling, you just go down the feral tree anyway. So you could even level the spec.
Awesome. Just a couple of questions that we already went over. I'll answer them real quick. How viable and good are Druid tanks in AQ and Nax? So Druids can tank any boss in AQ and Nax, except I believe Lotheb and in Nax, Lotheb and Sapphiron.
Yeah.
And then in terms of AQ, Princess Huhuron and Viscidus, however you pronounce it.
Yeah.
The good green slide.
And I have tanked those 2 bosses. I have a video about it, but I wouldn't recommend it. Druids are better off healing those fights instead. But yeah, other than that, I've main tanked all the other bosses on my Druid. Very capable of doing it.
There you go. AQ and Nax as a Feral Druid. God, does that dispel a lot of conventional wisdom. And thank you so much for helping dispel that and educating us today, Skarm. I very much appreciate it. Guys, Skarm Tank If you're not subscribed to him on YouTube, I don't know what you're doing with your life. Honestly, you should call your parents and ask for an intervention. Definitely check him out. Here's his YouTube channel. I'll link it right here. Probably the best, in fact, I would say definitely the best tanking videos in the classic scene right now. Really, really fun content to watch, very educational. Even for those who don't want to tank but just want to learn about high-end vanilla PvE, he's got a lot of good info and content there.